Chapter 1677. Ding Xiaoqian immediately walked over from the front. His expression was filled with pride, as if he did not take anyone seriously. However, when he arrived in front of Mao Shuyu, he immediately broke into a smile and said, "Shuyu, why do you have to line up with these lowly commoners? Come, I will take you to the front." "Ding Xiaoqian, who allowed you to call me by my name?" Mao Shuyu did not appreciate his kindness at all. "Either call me Lady Mao, or call me Mao Shuyu." Ding Xiaoqian was rebuffed, and his expression was slightly awkward. His eyes swept over, and when he saw Ling Han and the Empress, he involuntarily vented his anger on them, and shouted, "What are you two doing?" Ling Han was not someone who was willing to suffer a loss. He was just about to speak, but Mao Shuyu had already stretched out a hand to block him, and said, "Why are you being so fierce to others?" Ding Xiaoqian's gaze was dark, and he glared fiercely at Ling Han. That was because the Empress was a woman. He smirked internally. When the selection came later, he would definitely keep his eyes on Ling Han and kill this guy. He humphed and strode off. "This guy is very petty, and definitely has his eyes on you too," Mao Shuyu said to Ling Han and the Empress. "Don't worry with me here, he would not dare do anything to you two. When the selection begins later, you two will follow by my side, and I will guarantee your safety." She was very confident. Ling Han couldn't help but smile and said, "Then many thanks." He had also made up his mind. If he encountered Ding Xiaoqian later, he would definitely let him know the immensity of heaven and earth. Meanwhile, the Empress could not be bothered. Her philosophy was very simple. If she was in a bad mood, she would kill. The procession slowly advanced. Occasionally, a few prodigies would appear, shocking everyone. But this city was really too small in the celestial realm. It was really difficult for freakish prodigies like Ling Han, the Empress, and the Rain Emperor to appear. Finally, it was Ling Han and the Empress's turn, followed by Mao Shuyu. There was no one else left. The Empress went first. This was the first test. According to the rules, only those who had reached the Eternal River tier were qualified to register, and the upper limit was the Genesis tier, or Severing Mundane tier. If there was a Severing Mundane ancestor that was willing to join the Dark Moon Army, even the great commander Mao Dai would welcome them with open arms. There was no need for them to come here. The test was very simple. It was just a rock, but there was an array set up on it. As long as one struck it with all their strength, it would reflect the examinee's cultivation level and aptitude. It was mainly determined by battle prowess. In addition, the quality of one's origin energy and special cultivation techniques would also be recorded and analyzed by the array. It could be said that this was quite accurate. The Empress stretched out her hand. Her slender hand was snow white, and her fingers were like spring onions. Even though she had already concealed her appearance, and had changed into loose clothes that concealed her perfect figure, when it came to her bare hand, many people were still intoxicated. This was a great demoness that could topple the world, a great source of calamity. Under the watchful eyes of countless pairs of eyes, Queen gently pressed the testing stone. Instantly, the testing stone emitted a white halo, and then quickly disappeared. Then, a thin line appeared on the left and right sides of the testing stone. Those were two pillars of light, one red and one purple. The red line was only half the height of the purple. High extreme of the Genesis tier, 2.5 stars aptitude. The examiner raised his head to look at the Empress, and showed an expression of shock. This was astonishing natural talent that was second only to Ding Xiaoqian. However, the Empress was not the only prodigy like this, but she could definitely rank in the top 10. This red line represented cultivation level, and the purple line represented aptitude, which was closely related to battle prowess. If the purple line surpassed the red line, it meant that one possessed the ability to battle surpassing one's cultivation level. The more the purple line surpassed, the higher the ability to battle surpassing one's cultivation level. Of course, the majority of people here had the same two lines, and a small number had their red line surpass the purple line, and they would be immediately eliminated. The Dark Moon Army did not need trash, and did not even need reserves. Only 2 stars aptitude was the result of discussion between her and Ling Han. They did not want to be too ostentatious. Their understanding of the celestial realm and Dark Moon City was really too little. However, the Empress had not undergone this kind of test before, and accidentally reached 2.5 stars. Passed, your number is 5572. The examiner registered the Empress and handed her a badge. She had not been officially recruited, so they could not even be bothered to record down her name and other information. The Empress took the badge and still did not speak. She merely stepped back a little and waited for Ling Han. Ling Han smiled at Mao Shiyu and said, "Miss Mao, you go first." As a man, he was still quite gentlemanly. He would be the last. Mao Shiyu did not stand on ceremony and walked up. After focusing slightly, she delivered a heavy blow to the testing rock. White light surged, and then immediately disappeared, and the red and purple line appeared again. Consummate level of the Genesis tier, 3 stars aptitude. The examiner exclaimed in shock. Finally, another super prodigy had appeared, and Ding Xiaochen would not be the only winner. However, this was also normal. One was a prodigy of the Ding clan, and the other was the only daughter of the great commander. They were born much superior, so wasn't it very normal that they were far ahead by now? Miss Mao, your number is 5573. The examiner deliberately stood up and handed his badge to Mao Shiyu. It couldn't be helped. Her old man was his superior, so how could he not be a little more respectful? Mao Shiyu hastily accepted the badge and was about to leave, but after taking 2 steps, she stopped again and turned around to face Ling Han. Obviously, Ling Han had allowed her to take the test first, and she also wanted to give face to Ling Han, or at least wait until he completed the test. Furthermore, she still remembered her promise to protect Ling Han and the Empress. In the distance, Ding Xiaochen crossed his arms, a cold smirk on his face. At first, Ling Han had very much wanted to keep a low profile, but when he saw Ding Xiaochen's expression, he couldn't help but feel angry. He too looked at Ding Xiaochen and pointed a finger at the testing rock. Xiao! A flash of sword light flashed, and the testing rock suddenly surged with white light. Then red and purple lines appeared. High extreme of the Genesis tier, 3.5 stars aptitude. The examiner looked at the testing rock, looking like an idiot. Is this thing broken? 3.5 stars. You must be joking. What? Ding Xiaochen could no longer maintain his composure, and immediately leaped over. He looked at the testing rock, his face slightly green. He had actually been surpassed. A 3.5 stars prodigy had actually appeared here. The last time a 3.5 stars prodigy had appeared was 3 eras ago, when Mao Dai had made a name for himself. Any further back, and it was the strongest prodigy of the Ding clan, Ding Yaolong. This kind of prodigy, without exception, would ultimately be able to reach the consummate level of the 4th severance. One era was 100 million years, and there were really too many people with long lives in the celestial realm. The normal method of counting years was too inconvenient. Additionally, one era was 12 trillion years, and there were not many elites that could last the entire time, because there was still the Immortals' Tribulation. If they could not continue to become stronger, there would eventually be a day when even celestial kings would die. As long as they advanced into the severing mundane tier, their lifespan would be unlimited. But why was it that after innumerable eras, the majority of elites ultimately died at the first severance because of the Immortals' Tribulation? It was too difficult to break through. People said that there were 9 levels of Celestial King tier, and each level was like ascending to the heavens. But wasn't the severing mundane tier and ascending origin tier the same? Severing the mundane was to sever heavens will on oneself. If one was unlucky, what was severed was not one's mortal fate, but one's own Tao fruit. Chapter 1678. Generally speaking, 1-star aptitude had hopes of becoming a first severance Grand Elder, 2-star aptitude was the second severance, and 3.5 stars were qualified to attempt the 4th severance. Of course, this was all in theory. However, one thing was certain. 3.5 stars aptitude might not be able to become a 4th severance, but those that could become a 4th severance would at least have 3.5 stars aptitude. Gasp! Ding Xiaochen looked at Ling Han, his eyes filled with jealousy. This was too inconceivable. A lowly commoner actually had 3.5 stars aptitude. Even he could only become a third severance Grand Elder at most. Though aptitude was not fixed and unchangeable, and could be completely raised or lowered with different cultivation techniques, or ingested some super celestial medicine, how could it possibly be changed without special opportunities? If he knew that both Ling Han and the Empress had only done so casually, and their true potential far surpassed 3.5 stars, what expression would he have? Passed. Your number is 5574. The examiner stood up again and handed his card to Ling Han. Perhaps after a few years, this would be another Mao Dai and create a new legend. What is your name, and where are you from? Mao Shiyu's eyes lit up, and she looked Ling Han up and down. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, I am called Ling Han, and have just entered Dark Moon City. Previously, I had been living in the forest, until a beast tide erupted in the mountains not long ago. Our entire village was either dead or scattered, so we fled to Dark Moon City. This was the story that he, the Empress, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, and the large black dog had long since agreed on. Ling Han. Ding Xiaochen also walked over. He looked disdainfully at Ling Han. I'll give you a huge opportunity to become my follower. Don't think that this is an insult to you. In truth, who knows how many prodigies and elites want to become my follower, but do not have this opportunity at all. He naturally did not want to guide Ling Han, but rather wanted to keep this super prodigy by his side, and casually think of a way to kill him in the future. It was enough to have him among the top prodigies of Dark Moon City. There was no need for anyone to stand on equal footing with him. What more surpassing him? Not interested. Ling Han naturally refused. Ding Xiaochen's expression darkened, and he said, Brat, don't be shameless. Hee. Ling Han couldn't be bothered to respond this time and just laughed. Ignore him. Mao Shiyu scoffed and said, Ding Xiaochen, this lady is warning you not to act recklessly. I plan to introduce this person to father. Does he have any interest in taking a disciple? If you have any thoughts that you should not have, even if you are a member of the Ding family, father will still dare to kill you. Ding Xiaochen couldn't help but flick his finger lightly. This was a manifestation of his great fury. He stared at Ling Han for a while, and a cold smile appeared at the corners of his lips. He was merely in the high extreme, so even if he had 3.5 stars aptitude, so what? He had the advantage of more than a minor level, and this still couldn't make up for the difference of half a star of aptitude. The following selections were unavoidable. So what if he killed them? Rules are rules. He did not say anything else, but the killing intent in his eyes could not be more obvious. Ling Han was displeased. He thought to himself that it would be great if he could use the Rock Palace's name as well. If he killed such a loathsome person, then so be it. He wouldn't have to worry about the power behind him taking revenge. However, he had promised Hu Yu that he would raise the Ding family to the ground. At first, he didn't like to bring trouble to others. No matter how notorious a clan was, there would always be a few good and innocent people. But now his attitude had become firm. Who cared if there were good people in your Ding family? He was determined to be innocent. Those who have obtained a badge, please advance, and begin the following selections. A middle-aged man dressed like a military officer appeared. He was a peak stage Saint King, and could be considered a supreme elite in the ancient realm. But here, he was only an ordinary military officer. And this was because Dark Moon City was a 1-star city. If he ran to a 2- or 3-star city, he might only be able to become a soldier of the lowest level. Over 5,000 people advanced, and arrived at the foot of the mountain. The officer took a step forward and said, For those who have passed the selection today, I will be your instructor for the next 100 years. I don't care who you are. Once you're here, in my hands, you're just soldiers. Do you understand? Understood. Over 5,000 people shouted loudly. Additionally, my name is Tu Kong. You can call me instructor too. That military officer continued. Now, I will explain the rules of the selections. Set out from here, and climb over 9 mountains. There will be a large number of blood shadow wolves there. Their strength varying from the Eternal River tier to the Genesis tier. What you all have to do is bring back the tail of a blood shadow wolf. He paused, and then continued. Only the 1,000 people who bring back the tail of a blood shadow wolf the fastest will be qualified to become the reserve team of the Dark Moon Army. As for the others, I don't care what the reason is, they will all be eliminated. In this period of time, all those who are responsible for their own life and death, those who are afraid of death, get lost now. In fact, everyone already knew these rules. This was not the first time that some people had participated, but some first-timers hesitated. At first, they had thought that they would not be afraid, but now that they had reached this step, they were still afraid. About 300 people chose to give up, but there were still over 5,000 left, and the elimination rate was extremely high. Then let's go. Tu Kong snapped his fingers and then sat down. Boom! Over 5,000 people immediately charged out. The selections this time not only required strength, there was also an element of luck. For example, though Eternal River Tears could not possibly be a match for Genesis Tears, as long as they were lucky and encountered an Eternal River Tear Blood Shadow Wolf, they still had a chance to enter the top 1,000. Follow me. Mao Shi was very trustworthy and beckoned to Ling Han and the Empress. Ling Han and the Empress did not mind, either, and followed her. The three of them used their movement techniques and traversed through the forest. In the ancient realm, the speed of saints was about the same, unless it was those Genesis Tears that specialized in the regulations of space, and only then would they be superior in terms of speed. But in the celestial realm, the speed of Genesis Tears was uneven. The reason was that the regulations of the celestial realm were complete, and the structure of heaven and earth was incredibly stable. If one wanted to form high speed, they would have to overcome layers of resistance, and this caused a difference in the speed of each Genesis tier. Saint Kings were definitely faster than Great Saints, and Great Saints were definitely faster than Medium Saints. Of course, this was not applicable to freaks like Ling Han and the Empress. Mao Shiyu did not know this, so she took the initiative to slow down. She was afraid that if she traveled at full speed, Ling Han and the Empress would lose track of her. However, this kind of speed was fast enough. After all, there were only over 300 Saint Kings this time around. In the selection battle, it was enough to enter the top 1,000. If their results were a little better, they would only be able to stand out earlier in the contest for the position of team leader. To her, this was completely insignificant. What was there to be afraid of with strength? Meanwhile, Ding Xiaochen followed behind them, looking like an eagle hunting its prey. The moment Mao Shi relaxed in the slightest, he would launch a swift strike and dispose of Ling Han. If Mao Shi was not present, Ling Han would actually be very happy to lead Ding Xiaochen to a remote place and dispose of this bastard. But he could not possibly silence Mao Shi as well now, right? He flipped a middle finger at Ding Xiaochen and mouthed a curse. Having been with the large black dog and the others for so long, if Ling Han wanted to anger someone, he still had quite a lot of methods. Fuck. Ding Xiaochen's expression involuntarily darkened. He swore that if Ling Han fell into his hands, he would definitely make the latter wish he was dead. Chapter 1680. Prodigy, King Tier. These two terms had always been overused. As long as one's performance was a bit more outstanding, they would be crowned with the title of prodigy, and if they were a bit more talented, they would be top-notch prodigies, super prodigies. In truth, there was only one type of person that could be called a king tier in the celestial realm. The evaluation standards for severing mundane tier, immortal palace tier, and so on were still unclear, but at least below celestial level, that was those that had truly reached the pinnacle of the Eternal River tier, were worthy of being called a king tier. This kind of king tier was really too rare. Even in top-notch sects, only the holy sons and holy daughters could reach this level. For other forces, they would really have to burn incense to have such a person appear. The Empress walked back and showed a sweet smile at Ling Han, handing him the saintly medicine. This could be planted in the Black Tower and dug out when it was needed. Now that the 6th level of the Black Tower had been opened, the speed of catalyzing the growth of plants had not increased, but it could allow all living things to grow stronger, and the medicinal effects would increase. The Empress then gave Ling Han and Mao Shiyu a wolf tail each, and then walked hand in hand with Ling Han. The saintly medicine had been gathered, and the wolf tail had also been obtained, so it was naturally time to leave. Mao Shiyu received the wolf tail numbly. She had not recovered at all, and there were only 3 words in her mind. How was this possible? In any case, it is still early, so why not get some more saintly medicine? Ling Han's eyes shone. The Empress nodded. As long as it was Ling Han's suggestion, she would definitely not object. Mao Shiyu followed behind the 2 of them like a dead fish. They swept through and gathered a total of 6 saintly medicines. Mao Shiyu, who had barely recovered, advised them that it was time to return, or they would definitely be ranked outside the top 1,000. Ling Han was not satisfied, but he should be able to come here again in the future, so there was no rush. They returned, and though they encountered a few blind demonic beasts that ambushed them on the way, they were easily dealt with by Mao Shiyu. A day later, they returned to the gathering point. Based on the number of people that had already returned, they would probably be ranked after 600th or 700th. It was fine as long as they passed. After another half a day, the top 1,000 appeared, and the selection ended. Tu Kong left with the 1,000 people, arriving at a military camp at the foot of the mountain. This was where they would stay for the next 100 years. They had not even entered the camp, and they could feel a powerful aura rippling. This surpassed the level of the Genesis tier, as if it was a supreme ruler. Severing Mundane Ancestor, one of the deputy commanders of the Dark Moon Army, was temporarily transferred over to oversee the army for 100 years. And in the Dark Moon Army, there were a total of 6 such deputy commanders, and they would take turns to oversee this place. Otherwise, if they encountered some thorns, even the consummate level of the Genesis tier might not be able to deal with them. With a Severing Mundane Ancestor here, everything would be settled. Which Genesis tier would dare provoke such an elite? Of course, Tu Kong was not the only instructor here. There were a total of 10 instructors. Usually, they would take turns to instruct the students on how to cooperate. Those who fought alone were called martial artists, and those who acted as a team were called soldiers. The 10 instructors appeared at the same time, and the deputy commander sat high up on the stage, as if he had merged with heaven and earth. They could clearly feel his presence, but no matter who it was, they would have the uncomfortable feeling of not being able to attack him. This was a Severing Mundane Ancestor. Now, we will choose 10 captains from among you. According to the results of the selection, these 10 people will step forward. Number 170, number 534, and number 895. After Tu Kong asked for instructions from that Severing Mundane Ancestor, he began the next step. The 10 people that were called stepped forward, and it was not strange. Ding Xiaochen was also among them. When he walked out, he even bowed slightly towards the Severing Mundane Ancestor on the high platform, and the latter actually responded, opening his eyes and nodding. When this ancestor opened his eyes, it was as if the universe had collapsed. Everyone felt as if innumerable great stars had fallen from the skies, and it was a scene of destruction. But after a shudder, they discovered that there was not the slightest bit of abnormality that had occurred. This was the regulations that the Severing Mundane Ancestor cultivated, and was inclined towards destruction and slaughter. The moment he opened his eyes, it affected everyone. If one's willpower was slightly weaker, it was very possible that they would be affected by this for the rest of their lives, and would never be able to escape. Cultivation was naturally the cultivation of the Tao of heaven and earth. If you were trapped in the Tao of another, how could you possibly succeed? That is Lord Ding Hu, first Severance Grand Ancestor, the Vice Commander of the White Tiger Army. A few people immediately began to discuss in low voices. And very soon, those that originally did not know the identity of that Severing Mundane Ancestor all knew. The Dark Moon Army had a great commander, and that was Mao Dai, a third Severance Grand Ancestor. Under the great commander, there were 3 commanders, and they respectively led 3 armies, which were the Azure Dragon Army, the White Tiger Army, and the Vermilion Bird Army. Why were there 3 armies, and not 2, and not 4 or 5? That was because there were only 3 great forces in Dark Moon City. The Duong clan controlled the Azure Dragon Army, the Ding clan controlled the White Tiger Army, and the Long clan controlled the Vermilion Bird Army. From a certain aspect, Actually, Mao Dai, the great commander, was a mere figurehead. Under the commander were the vice-commanders, and there were a total of 6 of them, 2 for each army. Everyone shook their heads. With Ding Hu present, that Ding Xiaoqun would definitely be able to obtain the position of a captain no matter what. However, with Ding Xiaoqun's strength, it was actually not difficult for him to obtain it. Thus, though everyone was slightly displeased, they did not have too much of a conflict. The rules are as follows. Now these 10 people are the arena masters, and they will accept challenges from others. If they win, they will guard the arena, and if they lose, someone else will guard the arena. The time limit is 3 days, and the 10 arena masters at that time will be the choice of captains. Additionally, the outcome of each battle must be decided within an hour. If there is no winner, then the arena guardian will be declared the winner. After each battle, the victor has the right to request an hour of rest time. If there is no challenge within an hour, then the arena master will directly win. Then let's begin. Tu Kang's style was filled with the conciseness of a soldier, and was not the slightest bit sloppy. Ding Xiaoqun and the other 10 people walked into the training ground in the center of the camp. The celestial realm was incredibly stable in the first place, and added with the fact that there was a severing mundane ancestor overseeing things, there was naturally no need to worry that a fierce battle would destroy the entire camp. The arena masters had already appeared, and those who were interested in competing for the position of captain all swept their eyes over the 10 people, looking for the weakest persimmon to bully. However, because there were 3 days, even if there was a weakest persimmon, it would be replaced very quickly, so there was no meaning in making a move in a hurry. However, because there was still an hour's time limit, if there was no one else to challenge, then the arena master would sit firmly on the position of captain. Thus, when the hour was almost up, there were people who successively issued challenges to the 10 arena masters. True enough, entering the top 10 during the selection process had a very large component of luck. Some people had even hidden their strength well, saving their strength for this moment to explode. In just this round of battles, 6 of the 10 arena masters had actually been replaced, and more than half had been replaced. Ling Han said to an old man, and then to the Empress, "This guy's strength is not bad, and it seems like his bloodline is different from ordinary people." As long as that old man was in battle, his whole body would be covered in pitch-black scales. This was completely a thick layer of armor, and possessed an extremely strong dissipation effect, allowing him to not fear his opponent's attacks and advance head-on. His opponent had been defeated in 10 moves by him in such a manner. And that person, the Empress also said to a woman. Chapter 1681. It was a woman dressed completely in a long black dress, her features old-fashioned. Though she only looked to be in her 20s, she was stern and serious, as if everyone owed her money, and she hated them all. Her attacks were ruthless, and she controlled the extremely rare regulations of darkness. As darkness swept past, everything would be corroded, and it was incredibly terrifying. Ling Han also cultivated the regulations of darkness, which was the darkness of the paramount night, but it was more of a support type, completely different from her destructive corrosion. And that young man? Ling Han pursed his lips. The young man he spoke of looked to be only 16 or 17 years old, and there was still some childishness on his face. From time to time, he would show a bashful smile, but if anyone thought that he was harmless because of this, they would be in deep trouble. The young man used a sword, and was incredibly fast and incredibly sharp. Previously, he had struck out 11 times in a row, forcibly breaking his opponent's weapon, and the last strike had pierced into his opponent's chest. If it weren't for Ding Hu humping softly and pushing him back, his opponent would probably already be a corpse by now. Sinister, vicious, and merciless. This was the label that Ling Han attached to this young man. He should have become an assassin. Being a soldier was really a waste of his talent. True enough, this young man even attracted Ding Hu's attention. Though he humphed, expressing his displeasure at the young man attacking his companion, he couldn't help but take a few more glances at this young man. This kind of talent was worth recruiting into the Ding clan. If he was nurtured well, he would become a severing mundane tier assassin. battle prowess was the most important standard to measure an elite, but there was no such rule in the world that elites would not die at the hands of the weak. Of course, it was completely impossible for a Genesis tier to kill a severing mundane tier, but it was not a fantasy for a first severance to kill a second severance, or even a third severance. And this kind of example usually appeared on assassins. No one would always maintain their best battle condition, and there would always be moments of carelessness. An outstanding assassin would be able to grasp this fleeting moment and strike to take the life. In Ding Hu's eyes, this young man was a treasure. Unfortunately, though he had already thought of it, he did not dare to directly bring this young man back to the Ding clan. The three great clans had a rule, and talents like this had to compete fairly. However, since he was the one who discovered him first, he could get his family to take action later to investigate this youngster's preferences and weaknesses, and then take appropriate measures. After 90 years, those who had not been eliminated would officially join the Dark Moon Army, and in these 90 years, it would be the time for the three great clans to display their respective mystical powers. Some would promise great benefits, while others would simply recruit others into their clan, starting a fight over important talents. Of course, most of the time, no one could enter the discerning eyes of the three great clans. There were simply too few geniuses. For example, back then, Mao Dai had attracted the attention of countless noble ladies from the three great clans, yet he had unexpectedly not chosen any of them. However, because of this, he had not been controlled by the three great clans, and had maintained an absolutely independent status. Now he was also very aloof, and the three great clans were all competing to recruit him. The arena battles continued. Queen expressed that she would not compete for the position of team leader. She wanted to be with Ling Han. One of the two would definitely want to be a soldier. Otherwise, different teams would be in a competitive relationship. Elites moved one after another. In the army, only the brave would submit. If you defeated your opponent while he was exhausted, then even if you became the team leader, who would submit to you? Mao Shiyu had also joined the battle. She was at the consummate level of the Genesis tier, and also had 3-star aptitude. Her battle prowess was extremely strong, and she easily won the position of the arena master. Then I'm going. Ling Han released the queen's hand slightly reluctantly. The queen nodded gently, her gaze intoxicating. Ling Han leaped and arrived in front of someone. It was precisely Ding Xiaochen. When Ling Han actually went to challenge Ding Xiaochen, a considerable number of people exclaimed in shock. Previously, those who had gone to challenge Ding Xiaochen had all suffered a crushing defeat. Now it had already been almost an hour since anyone had challenged him. He was just about to become the first person to become team leader in less than 3 days. Yet his plans had been disrupted by Ling Han. This time, Ding Xiaochen would have to wait for at least an hour. Why did he have to challenge Ding Xiaochen? Wasn't that making things difficult for himself? Ding Xiaochen was also slightly startled, and then a sinister expression appeared on his face. Previously, he hadn't had the chance, and had never thought that Ling Han would actually deliver himself to his doorstep. He was really seeking death. This time, if it had been the other vice commanders of the three great clans present, Ding Xiaochen would be stopped even if he wanted to kill him. But would Ding Hu stop him? You're dead. Ding Xiaochen smirked coldly. I have to say, you are practically unbelievably stupid. Your mouth stinks. Did you not rinse your mouth when you woke up? Ling Han said slowly. When it came to bickering, he really wasn't afraid of anyone. The more stubborn you are now, the greater the suffering you will suffer later. Ding Xiaochen's lips curled up slightly. Facing a person who was definitely going to die, his self-restraint was still quite good, and he didn't lose his sense of propriety from being provoked. Hee. Ling Han laughed, putting all his disdain into these 2 words. Even if Ding Xiaochen's self-restraint was quite good, he was still easily angered by this chuckle. His face was filled with fury, and he forcefully inhaled a few breaths, telling himself that there was no need to lower himself to this brat's level, and just kill him. You're asking for it. He moved, pressing out a palm. Boom, origin power condensed into a large hand, and there was a pitch-black sun glowing on each of the 5 fingers, which was incredibly strange. Ling Han puffed and blew. With a whoosh, those 5 suns were the first to be extinguished, and then this large hand also turned into origin power and dissipated. Everyone was shocked, and it was as if they had just discovered Ling Han, staring at him and sizing him up. Was he really in the high extreme of the Genesis tier? In fact, he hadn't even reached the peak stage, and was at most in the late stage. 3.5 stars aptitude, so terrifying. Even Ding, who couldn't help but open his eyes, sizing up Ling Han. Actually, with his strength, it was the same whether he opened his eyes or not. Wherever his divine sense went, it was as his eyes could see. But because this scene was too shocking, it caused him to be moved, and he opened his eyes again. Ding Xiaochen was also looking at Ling Han, stunned. He didn't dare believe that this move of his had actually been so easily dealt with. This was 3.5 stars aptitude that allowed Ling Han to cross a minor level to match him? Fuck, was it really that exaggerated? He took a deep breath, and told himself that he couldn't be affected. He hadn't used his secret technique yet, and as long as he used it, suppressing an elite in the high extreme of the Genesis tier would be a simple task. You have some skill, but in front of me, putting aside the fact that you are only in the high extreme, even if you were in the consummate level, you would still be suppressed by me. Pa! Just as Ding Xiaochen finished saying these words, he was ruthlessly slapped across the face. Of course, he had been slapped by Ling Han. This was definitely intentional, waiting for Ding Xiaochen to finish saying these words before slapping him. This slap to the face was painful and resounding. Ding Xiaochen roared in fury. Boom, his hair fluttered, and his eyes turned into a vast expanse of white, as if they were blazing with electricity. This time he was really enraged. Being slapped in the face in public, how could he endure this? Die! He roared loudly. His whole person was wrapped up in a ball of time power, and he charged at Ling Han. He was going to crush this damned person into pieces. Chapter 1682. Ding Xiaochen charged over, wrapped in the power of time, as if he was impervious to all techniques. Ling Han casually flicked a finger. Pooh! The sword light slashed onto Ding Xiaochen's body, yet it was easily swallowed by the power of time, and was not affected at all. No wonder the Ding clan had deliberately targeted the Hu clan, and seized the secret technique of the Hu clan. This celestial technique was indeed powerful. When the power of time was unleashed, it practically ignored the difference in battle prowess, and allowed the user to become invincible. However, Ling Han had grasped quite a few celestial techniques. In fact, he had also learned the Tide of the Ages, and had also obtained the complete secret technique from Hu Yu. In terms of mastery of this celestial technique, Ling Han was not inferior to the Ding clan. The difference was that his present cultivation level was still slightly low, and could not fully display the might of this celestial technique. Haha, in front of the ultimate technique of my Ding clan, what are you? Ding Xiaochen's confidence returned, and he shouted loudly. Though even if he killed Ling Han, it could not possibly redeem the humiliation he had suffered. If he allowed Ling Han to live, then he could forget about raising his head in this lifetime. Ling Han smiled faintly, and flicked out another finger. Xiao! It was still a flash of sword light that streaked past, yet it forcibly tore apart the power of time on Ding Xiaochen's body. However, because its power was slightly weaker, it only managed to tear apart this layer of power of time before disappearing. But it was just this one moment that scared Ding Xiaochen. He hurriedly came to a screeching halt, an expression of incredible shock on his face. The other party had broken through his power of time. Although it hadn't hurt him yet, he would be in deep trouble if he were to receive another blow. How was this possible? Under his channeling of the Tide of the Ages, he should be able to age any attack. It should be known that he was a peak stage Saint King, and his cultivation level was already the highest in this cultivation level. Wanting to suppress him in terms of regulations, only a severing mundane ancestor could accomplish this. What right did Ling Han have to do this? Not only was he shocked, but Ding Hu also showed an expression of surprise. He had a faint feeling that perhaps Ling Han had not used his full strength. He had not used his full strength, yet he was able to defeat a young prodigy of the Ding clan. And one in the high extreme of the Genesis tier at that? Hiss, what a freak! Ding Hu was slightly hesitant. Logically speaking, the Ding clan should strive to obtain this kind of genius with 3.5 stars aptitude. But in the current situation, this young man seemed to have a great conflict with Ding Xiaochen. First impressions were the strongest, and this young man definitely did not have a good impression of the Ding clan. Even if they offered the same conditions in the future, the chances of Ling Han siding with the Long family and the Duan family would be much higher. Since that was the case, a surge of killing intent suddenly surged in Ding Hu's heart. Mao Dai was a good example. He had allowed Mao Dai to grow freely, and now, he had the power to threaten the 3 great clans. Fortunately, he only had one daughter. If the Mao clan was also flourishing, then in the future, there might be a 4th great power in Blue Moon City. The cake was only so big. Who would be willing to have their profits taken away from them? It would be best if Ding Xiaochen displayed his might and killed this brat. In any case, it was not very normal for him to slip up in a tournament. Ding Xiaochen was stunned for a moment, and only then did he regroup. He drew out a blade. The blade was dark green, and seemed to be made out of wood, but the moment he took it out, a terrifying murderous aura surged out, turning into a large tree. What was astonishing was that the branches of the large tree were waving about like whips. Around the jade blood man-eating tree, many people exclaimed in shock, their faces turning green. This was a kind of demonic tree that liked to prey on humans and demonic beasts. When it was not moving, it was like a normal tree. But if anyone came under the tree, the demonic tree would attack when that person was defenseless, using its branches to entangle the person. And its branches also had sharp thorns that could secrete poison, instantly paralyzing the target. With the trunk of this tree as the main body, and the soul of the demonic tree sealed in, the treasured tool refined would also possess a large portion of the might of the demonic tree. This was an extremely frightening god tool. Weapons were not prohibited in tournament battles, because what the Dark Moon Army needed were iron-blooded warriors that could kill, and not cultivators that could spar with others. With the saber in hand, Ding Xiaochen was instantly filled with confidence. The blade of the saber shone with a green light, illuminating even his face. Previously, he had not encountered a single opponent, so he naturally disdained to use a god tool, but now he was forced to by Ling Han. He was not in a hurry to attack. A green murderous aura was currently surging out from the blade of the saber, spreading out in all directions. This was the soul of the jade blood man-eating tree. Because the process of refinement was very frightening, the soul of the demonic tree was also filled with fury, its killing intent shockingly strong. Because he was the one controlling the saber, he was also completely immune to this kind of murderous aura, but others would be affected. Though the jade blood man-eating tree was a plant-type demonic species, other than cultivating the wood element regulations that it was born with, it also had poison regulations. This was its unique aspect. Regulations were formless and fused into its spirit, so this murderous aura carried a strong poison. Die! Ding Xiaochen looked at Ling Han coldly and said, "When the soul-severing saber is used, no one will survive." Ling Han laughed loudly. "If you don't go and tell jokes, it's really a waste of your talent for being funny. Listen to my advice. From tomorrow onwards, it's better to go to the tea houses and hotels in the city and hold special events." Stubborn. Ding Xiaochen activated his origin power, so that the power of the divine saber in his hand could be unleashed even faster. Ling Han shook his head and said, "At first, I was wondering how much power you had, but I didn't think that you would only be relying on a saber. I can't be bothered to let you perform." His figure moved, and he charged towards Ding Xiaochen. Using lightning flash, his speed was incredibly fast. Even though he had not activated it to the maximum, it was already not something that Ding Xiaochen could catch. It was just like how he had been slapped by Ling Han previously, and even now, he still did not know how he had been slapped. When Ling Han's fist was about to land in front of Ding Xiaochen, only then did he come to his senses. But at this moment, it was already too late for him to swing his saber at Ling Han. He could only explode with power from his feet and retreat. But could this compare to Ling Han? Pung! Ding Xiaochen's face was instantly struck solidly by a punch, and he couldn't help but stumble backwards. However, He had not even stabilized himself when Ling Han's second punch landed. Pung pung pung. In that short instant, he had been struck by over a dozen punches in succession. Can't even withstand a single blow, Ling Han said calmly, as if to explain his comment. Ding Xiaoqin's figure flew into the air, and then landed heavily on the ground with a bang. The surroundings were deathly silent. Even the other battles had stopped, and focused their attention on this side. Ding Xiaoqin was actually really so weak that he could not withstand a single blow. From beginning to end, Ling Han had only flicked his fingers and waved his fists. He had not used any powerful techniques at all. But what about Ding Xiaoqin? He had celestial techniques and a god tool. Yet he could not even withstand a single blow from Ling Han. Was this the difference between 3 stars aptitude and 3.5 stars aptitude? Everyone did not believe it. Perhaps if the two of them were of the same cultivation level, then this kind of difference might still be possible. But Ding Xiaoqin clearly had the advantage of a minor level. So how could such a situation have occurred? Ding Xiaoqin struggled to crawl to his feet. Pung! He was once again struck down by a punch from Ling Han. On the tournament stage, as long as one side did not collapse or admit defeat, then the battle would have to continue. Ding Xiaoqin was unwilling to admit defeat. He had already been completely humiliated by Ling Han, and if he admitted defeat in front of everyone, then he really would not be able to raise his head again. Chapter 1684. Ding Hu's face darkened. As a severing mundane tier Grand Elder, it had been a very long time since he had felt this kind of displeasure, but now a mere Genesis tier actually caused him to feel a powerful killing intent. He opened his mouth and said, "The person who can obtain the position of captain this time will be rewarded with 10 star stones." Star stones were a special product of the immortal domain, harvested from the fragments of stars above the 9 heavens, which were meteorites. The 9 heavens of the celestial realm could not be ascended. Legend had it that only the celestial king could ascend to the 9 heavens. Therefore, only when the fragments of the stars in the sky turned into meteors and fell down would one be able to extract star stones from them. Star stones contained the great Tao of heaven and earth, and were of great help to cultivators in increasing their realm. If they joined the Dark Moon Army, every soldier in the regular army would receive 2 star stones as their pay every year, and those in the reserve army would receive 1 star stone. Even the captains would only receive 2 star stones, which was the same as the soldiers in the regular army. Now Ding Hu had asked for 10 star stones. This reward could be said to be quite generous. Don't think that time is worthless in the celestial realm, because the competition in the celestial realm is cruel. Time is even more precious. Everyone knew what Ding Hu's intention was. He wanted to use money to bribe people to make a move against Ling Han. When he exerted pressure on them, they all ignored him, because the law did not punish the majority. Then, so what if it was 10 star stones? Who could refuse? To Ding Hu, taking out 100 star stones was naturally a small matter. It was merely a month's worth of cultivation resources for a severing mundane tier Grand Elder. With a great reward, there will surely be brave men. There were 2 reasons why no one had made a move earlier. Firstly, even if they defeated Ling Han, the position of team leader would still be uncomfortable. It was like there was a fire burning underneath. However, the reward of 10 star stones was different. Many people were willing to give it a try. This was because one person from the reserve army would be eliminated every year. What if he was eliminated in the first year? Therefore, 10 star stones were quite precious. Xiao, a person flew out and stood in front of Ling Han. It was a man with an ordinary appearance. He cupped his hands towards Ling Han and said, "Brother, I don't want to hurt you. How about admitting defeat?" An ominous glint appeared in Ling Han's eyes. Was there a need for him to be polite to someone who wanted to take advantage of his perilous situation? "Scram," he said indifferently. "Do you take my good intentions for granted?" That person sneered. His figure suddenly shot out, charging toward Ling Han. From his point of view, with Ling Han's current level of injury, he only needed a light blow to knock him down. Therefore, he had to carefully control his strength to avoid killing Ling Han. Ling Han made a move, grabbing that person's neck with one move, and then smashing him towards the ground. Pung! That person was instantly smashed heavily onto the ground, and before he could get up, Ling Han had already stepped on his head. "Let go!" roared that person. This was too embarrassing. He put his hands on the ground and tried to stand up. Ling Han ignored him. He only looked at Ding Hu was on the high platform, and then stepped down with his right foot. Pung! The man's head was stomped into the hard rock. One had to realize that the rocks here were extremely hard and could completely withstand the explosive power of a Genesis tier. However, Ling Han actually stomped on someone's head with a single foot. What kind of concept was this? The hands of the person below immediately drooped limply, and he directly fainted. Ling Han stepped on that person's head, his eyes fixed on Ding Hu, his provocation clear. "What move do you have? I'll take it all on." Domineering. Everyone paled. This brat was really ferocious, actually openly challenging a vice commander. Did he not know that this vice commander would be overseeing this place for as long as 100 years? If he was not eliminated, he would have to live in his shadow for these 100 years. However, even more people felt their blood boil. They felt that this was what a man should be, and this was what a cultivator should be. The rage of an ordinary man could still cause blood to splash 5 feet. Ding Hu couldn't help but twitch his little finger. This was a sign that he was about to lose control of his killing intent. However, if he dared to make a move at this time, he would definitely be targeted by the Long clan and Duan clan, and it was not impossible for him to pay with his life. There was definitely no friendly relationship between the 3 great clans, especially since the Ding clan had a criminal record. Because of their relationship, another great clan, the Hu clan, had been destroyed. Who wouldn't be on guard against them? There will be a chance in the future, Ding Hu said in his heart. He closed his eyes again, no longer paying attention to Ling Han's provocation. He didn't know what was going on, but he loathed Ling Han the moment he thought of him. Otherwise, how could he have forced a genius with 3.5 stars aptitude to stand against the Ding clan so quickly? Perhaps he sensed the loathing towards the Ding clan from Ling Han's eyes. An hour later, another greedy person launched an attack on Ling Han. He thought that he was just a flash in the pan, and that it was impossible for him to continue being so valiant. However, the result was the same. He was pressed to the ground by Ling Han, and his head was stomped into a rock. There was no one else who could be so domineering. After this, no one dared to challenge Ling Han anymore. He was too fucking ferocious. In fact, before 3 days had passed, the 10 captains had all distinguished themselves. Everyone had eyes, and those who could win a dozen or so battles in a row were definitely extremely strong. It was better not to seek trouble for themselves. Next, it was time to allocate the members of the 10 teams. Everyone could choose which captain to follow, but the captain could also choose whether he was willing to take them in or not. This was a two-way street. When everyone had made their choice, the remaining people would be randomly stuffed into a team that had not yet reached 100 people, regardless of whether they were willing or not. Ling Han stood still, bleeding profusely. The severing mundane tears martial art intent was wreaking havoc in his flesh and blood, and even the indestructible Heaven's Scroll could not expel it. The gap in cultivation level was really too great. He was like a lone wolf that was wounded and bleeding, yet his fighting spirit burned even more fiercely, and became even more terrifying. The Empress naturally chose him as the captain without any hesitation, but aside from her, no one else dared to come to his side. Who dared to offend Ding Hu? Previously, it could be said that the law could not be enforced when everyone was guilty, but now, if anyone took the initiative to follow Ling Han, wouldn't that be slapping Ding Hu in the face? Who dared to slap the face of a severing mundane ancestor? Compared to the other captains who were bustling with activity, Ling Han's side was cold and cheerless. A disapproving smile hung at the corners of his lips. Indeed, that was the case. He only wanted to use the Dark Moon Army to integrate into the celestial realm, and did not have any other thoughts. Without any desire, he naturally would be firm. Of course, he now definitely had a clear short-term goal, and that was to flatten the Ding clan. The other 9 captains were soon filled up with people, and the remaining 98 people had no choice but to be forcefully placed under Ling Han's command. At this time, Everyone no longer used numbers and registered their names and identity information. Ling Han found out that the person who looked like a child was called Wei Bo. The woman who used the corrosive power of darkness was called Qin Hengyu, and the old man who was covered in black-scaled armor was called Luo Xinyang. Because the people under Ling Han's command were all leftovers that had been selected, the quality of these people was naturally the worst. It was inevitable that they would all sigh sorrowfully. In the next 100 years, they would all be bullied by others. Chapter 1685. Dividing the 1,000 people into 10 teams was naturally not just for the convenience of management, but also for other purposes. Theoretically speaking, they could receive a piece of star metal as their pay every year. But in the reserve army, there was another rule, and that was that the 10 teams would have a great tournament every year. The team that ranked at the bottom would lose their pay for the next year, and it would be given to the team that ranked first as a reward. Ling Han's subordinates were all repulsive, and were the weakest team, so how could they compare with the other 9 teams? Weren't they destined to rank at the bottom? Thus, they were all dispirited, and some even had the thought of retreating. Why not voluntarily be eliminated next year, and wait another 100 years before joining the army? Ling Han did not say anything. In truth, he could defeat a team of 100 people by himself. What more when he was the Alchemy Emperor? There was no lack of saintly medicine here, and he could definitely concoct a large number of high-level godly medicine. As long as they followed him with all their heart, Ling Han guaranteed that he would not disappoint anyone. Of course, if they only wanted to follow him and take advantage of him, then they would scram as far as they could. Ding Hu swept a cold glance over Ling Han. He would use some means to make Ling Han disappear as soon as possible. They all entered the campsite, and each person had a separate room to rest in. Actually, they usually did not have much to do, and were just practicing their joint attack techniques. Occasionally, they would engage in actual combat to flatten a den of mountain bandits that were not very strong. However, this kind of actual combat would normally be arranged for 10 years later. If they did not cooperate, they would die too quickly in battle. After Ling Han and the Empress entered the room, they immediately entered into the Black Tower. Ling Han used the power of the Black Tower to wash away the martial art intent that Ding Hu had left in his body. Once this power of regulation was gone, his body instantly healed. The Empress's expression was cold, and she said, "I want to cultivate in seclusion and break through to the severing mundane tier within 3 years. 3 years later, the Ding clan will be completely annihilated." Daring to injure her husband, the Empress's killing intent was boiling. "Don't." Ling Han embraced her and kissed her black hair. "If you cultivate blindly, you can at most reach the peak stage of the consummate level of the Genesis tier. But if you want to break through to the severing mundane tier, you must go to a special place." Why was it said that the Holy King was the limit in the ancient world? This was not because of natural talent or cultivation technique, but rather because breaking through to the severing mundane tier required a special location in the celestial realm. Only there would one be able to sense the desolate power of the heavenly Tao and deliver a strike of heaven's will upon oneself. Otherwise, it would be useless even if you had the aptitude of a celestial king. You could only be trapped at the threshold of a sage king. The Empress's fury did not subside, and she said, "Then I'll reach the consummate level of the Genesis tier as soon as possible." She was filled with confidence in herself. As long as she reached the peak stage of the Saint King tier, she would be able to successfully sever the first saber and advance to the severing mundane tier. Ling Han shook his head. Breaking through to the severing mundane tier is not just talk. Why was severing mundane tier? It was to sever one's ties with the mortal world and completely merge with the great Tao. In other words, the more unwilling you are to sever your mortal bonds, the more you will be able to fuse with the great Tao of heaven and earth. This was what the heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire had told this to Ling Han alone. Severing the mundane required a total of 4 strikes. But putting aside 4 strikes, even a single strike would cause the majority of elites to become incredibly cold and detached. This was because they had already given up on what they cared about the most, Ordinarily speaking, this strike was meant to sever kinship, love, and friendship. Only now did the Empress reveal a shocked expression. For her, the most important thing now was Ling Han. If she had to sever her love, then she would rather die than do so. But breaking through to the severing mundane tier, with such an obsession, could possibly result in her killing herself and vanishing from this world. If one wanted to live forever, how could it be so easy? How could it be achieved without paying some price? The Empress thought for a while and said, "If I have to sever myself like this, I would rather not become a celestial and stay with you for the rest of my life." Severing the mundane did not necessarily have to sever love. Anything that one cared about could be severed, but when it really reached that step, under the torture of the furnace of heaven and earth, the majority of people would face their true hearts and unknowingly sever their most cherished mortal bonds. Being able to maintain clarity under the great Tao, that was something that only prodigies among prodigies could accomplish. So if I want to break through to the severing mundane tier, I definitely have to plan properly. Ling Han put his arm around the Empress's waist. Not just her, but everyone in the Black Tower had to make good preparations. Otherwise, they would easily sever their feelings for their family and lovers. He arrived under the reincarnation tree. Everyone was cultivating tirelessly. The Black Tower had gathered spiritual chi from the celestial realm and added with the help of the reincarnation tree. Everyone's advancement could be said to be advancing at a tremendous pace. After Ling Han explained the situation to everyone, he exited the Black Tower with the Empress. The people inside could not come out yet. No matter what, they had to merge the regulations of the two realms first. After a night's rest, training began. With teams as a unit, 10 teams were led by 10 instructors. The instructor of Ling Han's team was called Wu Jing. He was a rotund middle-aged man and had the cultivation level of a peak stage Saint King. "You bunch of trash, useless fleas. You're insulting me by asking me to train you." Wu Jing scolded them as he trained them. "I gave up on being on the side of my comrades to train you guys, so that you guys could put on a show like monkeys? Trash. Idiots. Pigs are 100 times smarter than you guys." He lashed out. Who cared if they had trained well or badly? He would scold them first. In the first place, everyone's morale was low because they had followed Ling Han, and the quality of their team was low. Being scolded by him like this, they were naturally all miserable and wanted nothing more than to immediately retire from the team. But it was not easy to enter, and it was not easy to leave either. Presently, they only had 2 ways to leave. The first was that one would be eliminated every year, and the second was that they would die for various reasons and leave lying down. Now that everyone had their eyes on that one spot of elimination, they naturally performed as poorly as they could. However, on only the 3rd day, Wu Jing announced to them with a strange expression that they had been assigned a mission to suppress bandits and would immediately set out. What, so soon? Everyone looked at each other, feeling that this was too sudden. They had just learned some joint attack techniques and could not be said to be cooperation, nor did they have any tacit understanding, but they were actually going to suppress bandits. This was practically sending them to their deaths. Perhaps they could succeed, but the price they had to pay would definitely be very shocking. Perhaps half of the people here would not be able to return. Everyone was not stupid, and they immediately guessed that this was definitely Ding who's doing, targeting Ling Han, while they were cannon fodder. They could not possibly just send Ling Han to his death, right? Ling Han, you are the team leader, so this mission must be completed perfectly. Wu Jing handed over a jade scroll. There is detailed information on that group of mountain bandits in here. They are just a motley crew, and there are only 10 peak stage Saint Kings. Therefore, the number of people lost this time must be controlled to be less than 10. If you exceed this number, you will be punished by military law when you return. Truine. Chapter 1686. Ling Han definitely did not believe Wu Jing's words. Perhaps he was only passing on information, and even he was not clear about the true strength of that band of mountain bandits. But Ling Han was certain that since this was Ding who targeting him, how could he possibly let him pass so easily? This group of mountain bandits would definitely be very powerful. Even if they couldn't kill Ling Han, they would still be able to severely injure their team. Then, when Ling Han returned, he would definitely be severely punished. They could easily find a reason to kill him in the dungeon. Ling Han shook his head. You, a mighty severing mundane ancestor, would go to so much trouble just to deal with him? This was also because the three great clans were keeping each other in check. Otherwise, Ding Hu indeed did not need to go to so much trouble. If he wanted to kill, he could kill. Who would dare say anything? Military orders could not be disobeyed. The team of 100 set out, and even the instructor did not accompany them, clearly intending to screw them to the end. Ling Han, however, was filled with confidence. Ding Hu had missed 2 points. Firstly, Ling Han's wounds had already healed, and his battle prowess had fully recovered. Secondly, the Empress was also an incredibly powerful source of battle prowess. To say nothing of the two of them teaming up, any one of them could defeat a Genesis tier. Unless a holy son or holy daughter of a great sect appeared, who could match these two guys? They had both formed 10 million stars in the Eternal River tier. No matter how ferocious the enemy was, the two of them, one on offense and the other on defense, were enough to deal with them perfectly. However, Ling Han and the Empress were confident, but the others did not. Rather than running to their deaths, they might as well become deserters. At most, they would never return to Dark Moon City. Once they left the city, there were people who wanted to flee. Ling Han moved, apprehending 13 people who had started to flee, and pushed out the 2 leaders. It was precisely these 2 who had contacted the others and caused this matter of desertion. I know that everyone does not have much confidence in this mission, but I will say something here. But let me say something here. As long as I'm here, nothing will be a problem. This time, I will only mete out a light punishment. But if anyone plans to desert again, then do not blame me for punishing them according to military law, Ling Han said menacingly. Everyone curled their lips. You make it sound so simple, but if we really start a war with the mountain bandits, how are you going to ensure our safety? However, Ling Han's powerful attack had suppressed everyone. At least for the time being, no one dared to desert. However, once the battle started, they might take advantage of the chaos to escape. They exited the city gate and rushed towards the chaotic Wind Mountains. That place was a 7-day journey from Dark Moon City. There was an important trade route at the foot of Freewind Mountain that connected Dark Moon City and Bayou City. Right now, a group of bandits had set up camp on the Windstorm Mountains, and they would occasionally rob the traveling merchants. In reality, there were bandits every year, and the caravans were already used to them. Most of the bandits would not kill them all, and would only ask for some compensation. Otherwise, if a fierce battle broke out, there would definitely be casualties. Were the bandits not afraid of death? However, this group of bandits was different. They were vicious and merciless, and they annihilated all merchant groups they encountered, and didn't leave any survivors. Furthermore, they were very cunning. If the caravans hired powerful guards, they would choose to avoid them, but if they could succeed, they would mercilessly exterminate the entire caravan. Ling Han had already formulated a strategy on the way. 100 people would disguise themselves as a caravan and lure the bandits to attack them. To ensure that the bandits would attack, Ling Han even had a few peak stage Saint Kings hide inside the carriage. However, this was actually unnecessary, because there weren't many elites in their team in the first place. There were only 6 peak stage Saint Kings. They drove the carriage, and did not conceal their identities, using the banner of the Dark Moon Army. However, anyone with a bit of experience would be able to confirm that this group was definitely rookies with just a few glances. Fresh recruits, added with a bountiful harvest, this was practically telling others, quickly come and rob us. Though this plan was simple, it was very practical. Not long after they arrived in the area of the chaotic Wind Mountains, Ling Han discovered that there were people following behind them. He even deliberately had the carriages speed up, clearly showing that he already knew that the situation was not good, and wanted to quickly flee. This move was very effective. Another 4 hours later, a group of people charged out from both sides of the road, cutting off their path of retreat and forward. We're just here to rob you, so you'd better obediently surrender. After we leave, we'll naturally set you free," said one of the thieves with a smile. Of course, this was a lie. If anyone really surrendered, then they would be cut down with a knife. The Empress stood out. With her proud personality, she was naturally not suited to protect others. Thus, she was the main attacker, and Ling Han was the main defender. The mountain breeze blew past, and the Empress's long dress fluttered. The fabric stuck tightly to her slender figure, outlining her perfect and flawless figure. Suddenly, the sound of gulping could be heard. "Great beauty, take off your veil and let us see," a mountain bandit said, whistling. "Old 9, perhaps this woman has a very ugly face. Just for that kind of figure, no matter how ugly she looks, I will still go for her. At worst, I will just cover her face. Turn off the lights. What use is there no matter how beautiful she is?" Ha ha ha. The mountain bandits all laughed together, all looking at the Empress with unbearable gazes. Every time after a robbery, if there were any women in the group of merchants, they would definitely be subjected to all kinds of abuse. Xiao, a figure flashed, and the Empress had already charged out. Her philosophy was very simple. If she was unhappy, kill. A human head flew into the air, and they saw the Empress standing beside that old 9. The latter was already only a headless body, and blood was still gushing from his neck. The mountain bandits were all greatly shocked. What astonishing speed, what frightening strength. "Little girl, you dare to kill our people. You are quite bold." A man who looked like the leader stood out. He looked at the Empress balefully. "At first, we could have spared your life, but you insisted on seeking your own death." He waved his hand and said, "Kill them all." The mountain bandits all roared loudly, and all charged forward. Every 5 people formed a small group, forming a special formation that worked together with each other. Whether it was their offense or defense, their might was greatly increased. The Empress's figure trembled, and she split into 9 doppelgangers. The 10 Empresses danced like butterflies, but wherever they passed, they brought with them a reign of terror. One after another, the mountain bandits turned into corpses and collapsed. No one could withstand more than 2 moves from the Empress, even if she was currently splitting her 10 doppelgangers to carry out a massacre. When they saw this scene, Ling Han's team finally became excited. So this group of mountain bandits were actually so weak that they could not even withstand a single blow. No, it was not that the mountain bandits were too weak, but rather that the Empress was too strong. Heavens! They had originally thought that only Ling Han was strong. But no matter how strong a single person was, how could he possibly be able to slaughter all the mountain bandits? But with the Empress's help it was different. One on offense, one on defense, it was enough to ensure that at least one of them did not die. Ling Han's previous promise had not been discounted in the slightest. Kill. They also became excited, and charged towards the mountain bandits. Chapter 1688. A big shot among peak stage Saint Kings had actually been instantly killed. Ling Han retracted his finger, smiled faintly and said, "Jiang Wushang, come out to see me." The bandits looked at each other in dismay, and the remaining deputy leaders all had awe-inspiring expressions as they said, "Let's attack together. Kill the men, and capture the women alive." Although they felt that the situation was troublesome, none of them could bear to kill the Empress. If such an exquisite beauty were to die, that would really be too much of a pity. However, there was no need to be polite to Ling Han. Boom! At least a few hundred mountain bandits leaped into the air at the same time, attacking Ling Han. They channeled their full power, and multiple galaxies appeared. Stars were born and destroyed within them, and multiple regulations appeared. After all, these mountain bandits had all cultivated to the Genesis tier, and those who were not at this cultivation level were not qualified to join them. Kill! The Empress humphed coldly, and her 9 doppelgangers appeared, unleashing powerful attacks in unison. Suddenly, divine light flashed in the valley, each one capable of destroying one's soul and taking one's life. Ling Han also made his move. Hong! A ball of flames erupted from within his body. It was like a world-destroying flame, but also like a purifying flame. It wanted to cleanse away all darkness and filth, welcoming a new world. Nine Heavens flame. As Ling Han's cultivation base rose, the might of the Nine Heavens flame grew stronger and stronger. This was one of the 9 great ancestral flames of the immortal realms. How tyrannical was it? Boom! The 9 Heavens flame swept past, and the mountain bandits only had time to let out a pained cry before they were immediately burned to ashes. Run, run for your life! In just a few moves, all the bandits' faces turned green, and they all turned tail and ran. This man and woman were like demons, unbeatable. Good and evil will be repaid. This is the cycle of the heavenly Tao. Ling Han stretched out his hand, and the 9 Heavens flame formed a large net above the mountain valley, preventing every mountain bandit from escaping. Meanwhile, he and the Empress guarded the only path into the mountain valley. This was like closing the door to beat the dogs. Let's go all out. The bandits' eyes were bloodshot as they charged back. This time, they no longer had any protective feelings for the fairer sex, and even the Empress suffered their frenzied attacks. Compared to my life, what's a beautiful fairy? They were all outlaws, not Casanova. Unfortunately, the difference in strength was too great. So what if they risked their lives? It was a one-sided massacre, and neither Ling Han nor the Empress showed any mercy. Ling Han abhorred these mountain bandits for committing all sorts of evil deeds, and the Empress was completely condescending. Other than Ling Han, and the people related to Ling Han, all living creatures in the world were the same to her, like straw dogs. Killing these bandits was as easy as stepping on a few ants. This massacre only lasted for the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn. All the bandits were killed, and even the deputy leaders were unable to withstand a single blow. Clap, 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 clap. At this moment, the sound of applause could be heard. A scholar in green robes walked out of a bamboo house. His skin was very white, and his appearance was very delicate. He looked to be in his 30s. Jiang Wushang? Ling Han asked. That's me. The green-robed scholar nodded his head in a very scholarly manner. Ling Han was slightly surprised. In his mind, the leader of this group of vicious and evil mountain bandits should be a rough and coarse barbarian. No matter what, it did not overlap with the scholarly scholar in front of him. With the strength of the two of you, I should not be able to survive today's calamity. However, before I make my move, I hope that the two of you can listen to my story. Jiang Wushang bowed to the two of them. Ling Han was also a little curious and said, Please speak. Jiang Wushang organized his thoughts slightly, and then said, Actually, I cannot be considered a cultivator. I have spent my entire life immersed in the study of ancient history, married a gentle and beautiful wife, and gave birth to an adorable son. Though I have always been praised by others as extremely talented in martial art, I actually hate things like fighting and killing very much. And yet, he paused and his eyes spat fire. One day, I went out to discuss the missing parts of ancient history with a friend, but when I returned home, I discovered that my wife and son were both dead. I almost went crazy. After I calmed down, I looked for many people based on the scattered clues, and only then did I find out that a profligate son of the Ding clan had lusted after my wife's beauty and wanted to use force. My wife would rather die than submit, and was beaten to death by him. In order to vent his anger, he even threw my only 3-year-old son to death. I went down to take revenge, but before I could even enter the gates of the Ding clan, I was beaten half to death, and was thrown out of the city, where I was left to rot into bones. Originally, I was definitely going to die, but the heavens did not let me die, and actually used the sweet spring of the earth to recover from my injuries. I knew that the Ding clan was too powerful, and that I would not be able to take revenge in this lifetime. Thus, I became a mountain bandit. I would massacre all the caravans that came out of Dark Moon City, and cause some trouble for the Ding clan. This Ling Han sighed internally. Jiang Wushang's experience was indeed very tragic, and was worthy of sympathy, but in order to make the Ding clan feel pain, he had killed who knew how many innocent people, and who knew how many women had suffered the same fate as his wife. This person's heart had already been completely twisted by hatred. He paused, and then said, You are already a peak stage Saint King, and your talent is extraordinary, so why don't you try to advance into the severing mundane tier? At least there would be a sliver of hope for revenge. Jiang Wushang gazed at the sky and revealed a gentle smile. He said, "What I can't let go of the most is my love for my wife and child. But if Zhang Chen slashes down with his blade, this love will be severed. In that case, I would rather not take revenge." Severing the mundane tear, sever one's most important mortal ties. But the reason why mortals were mortals was because they could not let go of this and that. How could this mortal tear be so easily severed? Jiang Wushang was undoubtedly a person who valued relationships. In order not to forget his love for his wife and son, he did not even try to break through to the severing mundane tear, and could even let go of his great hatred. Ling Han sighed and said, "Jiang Wushang, your evil deeds are too severe, so I have no choice but to kill you. But I can promise you that one day, I will raise the Ding clan to the ground and give you justice." Jiang Wushang laughed loudly and said, "Regardless of whether the two of you can succeed or not, I will thank you in advance. This is my last battle, so let this battle-weary person like me have a brilliant battle, and mark the end of my life in the extreme." He gave a soft roar, and a frightening aura surged out from his body, enough to make even peak stage Saint Kings tremble. "When I was in the Eternal River tier, I cultivated 6 million stars. If it were not for the fact that I really have no interest in martial art, it is possible that I could have broken through to the pinnacle of 8 million, or even 10 million stars," Jiang Wushang said calmly. "Thus, the two of you should not be careless. Otherwise, if you are killed by me, hee. Ling Han glanced at the Empress and said, "It is better that I do it." Though Jiang Wushang had committed the most heinous crimes, he was still a man, so he should be the one to send him on his final journey. The Empress nodded gently and retreated to one side. Chapter 1689. Die! Jiang Wushang roared. Boom! He charged out, his hands each turning into a sun, shooting out endless light. He was a natural talent for martial art. Even if he didn't spend much time on martial art, his battle prowess was still frighteningly strong. Every strike could make heaven and earth pale. If he was in the ancient realm, he could shatter a great star with a single breath. It should be known that even a small saint needed a long time to accumulate power for a powerful move to destroy a star. And this breath could shatter a star. What kind of concept was that? But in front of Ling Han, this was still not enough. To say nothing of the fact that Ling Han's battle prowess was invincible in the Genesis tier. Even if he didn't retaliate, could Jiang Wushang break through his physique? However, Ling Han wasn't in a hurry to attack. This was Jiang Wushang's last battle. He decided to let the latter unleash his full battle prowess and end his life when he reached his peak. Jiang Wushang had no thoughts of victory or defeat at all. He only displayed all the martial art he had comprehended in his life. With his strength, he could slaughter this den of bandits by himself, and the strength of his battle prowess was evident. He clearly rarely battled, and his every move was incredibly jerky, but this time, he only had the thought of fighting. With his talent, he quickly melted away this jerkiness, becoming experienced and ruthless. Even Ling Han had the heart to cherish talent, but he forcefully suppressed this impulse. Boom! The 9 heavens flame flared, and as lightning flash circulated, he broke through head-on. The tide of the ages corroded all attacks, and his fist landed on Jiang Wushang's chest. Pooh! The fist pierced through the heart, but there wasn't a single drop of blood. Under the burning of the 9 heavens flame, what blood was there? Jiang Wushang coughed up blood. He looked at Ling Han, and his eyes gradually dimmed, but a smile of relief appeared at the corner of his lips. Even he hated himself like this, but he didn't dare to commit suicide. His deep hatred was constantly lashing at him. He was so crazy to take revenge on others, but he was actually seeking his own death, hoping that an elite could act in his place and take his life. In this way, he could reunite with his wife and son in the netherworld, and if there was a next life, they could be husband and wife, father and son again. The flame of the 9 heavens burned furiously, turning Jiang Wushang into ashes that returned to the world. Ling Han was silent for a moment, then turned around and smiled at the queen. Let's scavenge for a bit then go home. The Empress nodded. Because she only had Ling Han in her eyes, she naturally would not be affected by Jiang Wushang's story and death. However, the words "go home" immediately turned her into a gentle little woman. The two of them plundered all the treasures in the mountain bandits' lair. There were a large number of pills, satin, saint materials, and saint medicines. If he encountered godly metal, Ling Han would directly use the divine demon sword to swallow it. After a round, the divine demon sword actually advanced 19 steps as expected. Immortal domain was rich in natural resources. Reaching the 20th level was relatively easy. But from godly metal to divine metal, this step was incredibly difficult. Not only did the divine demon sword have to swallow a huge amount of level 20 godly metal, it also had to endure the test of heaven and earth. An immortal artifact was equivalent to an immortal king. How could it be so easy to obtain? Ling Han, come over here. The empress called out from nearby. This was the place where the mountain bandits stored their treasures. Some things had been divided, but the majority of the treasures had still been left here, and had not been stored away in a spatial container. The empress held a scroll in her hand. It was completely black, and when she held it in her hand, it was even heavier and incredibly hard. This was definitely not paper, but rather metal that had been spun, and then woven together with some kind of beast hair. From the outside, one could see that the scroll was layered in layers, and in the end, it was tied up with a ribbon, but it could not be untied at all. It was as if this was not a ribbon, but rather had been fused together with the scroll, and no amount of strength could do anything to it. Ling Han and the empress exchanged a look, and could see the surprise in each other's eyes. This must have been made by an elite. Perhaps it is only a letter, but if one's level is not high enough, they are not even qualified to open it, Ling Han said. It should be known that he was already the strongest elite below the severing mundane tier. But he was not even qualified to open a scroll. The two of them tried their best but were unable to succeed. Put it away first. Ling Han wanted to throw the scroll into the Black Tower, but discovered to his surprise that this could not be done, because he could not wrap his divine sense around this scroll. For example, his divine sense was a net, and this scroll was a heavy object in the fishing net. It was so heavy that the moment he drew in the net, it would break through the net and fall down. He could only keep the scroll close to his body, and his plan to use the Black Tower to open the scroll also failed. However, he had still gained a great harvest this time. He had obtained over 100 saintly medicines, and if the mountain bandits had not expended them wantonly, this number would have far exceeded that. Additionally, there was also a large amount of godly metal, but it had all been swallowed by the divine demon sword. There were also over 1,000 star stones, which could help him comprehend Tao. There was also a large amount of silk that was woven from the silk of Genesis-tier demonic beasts, and was on the level of saintly material. If it was used to make clothes, its defensive properties would be very good. Ling Han was very satisfied. If he did not have Jiang Wushang's tragic story, he would be even happier. But this firmed his resolve, and that was to destroy the Ding clan. Whether it was in the ancient realm or the celestial realm, Ling Han had not heard of any good people coming from the Ding clan. What he had heard, and what he had personally experienced, was only the domineering nature of the Ding clan. Ling Han and the empress returned, and when everyone found out that the whole mountain bandits' lair had been destroyed by Ling Han and the empress, they immediately cheered loudly. Naturally, no one was foolish enough to mention the matter of the spoils of battle. On their way back, they carried the banner of the Dark Moon Army, so they naturally did not have to pay the entrance fee when entering the city. They were directly allowed to return to the camp. Ling Han went to report the battle situation to Wu Jing. He played it down, and only said that this mountain bandits were too weak, and had been easily destroyed by them. Only 7 of them were lightly wounded, and not only were there no deaths, there was not even a single serious injury. This kind of battle result shocked Wu Jing. He personally went to inspect the troops, and then saw the large amount of corpses and weapons that they had brought back. This was the most conclusive evidence. He ran to report to Ding Hu, but a short while later, an order was sent over, requesting that Ling Han hand over all the spoils of battle. The reason was that this was a loss that belonged to Dark Moon City, so it naturally had to be confiscated. When Ling Han heard this, he He almost slammed a palm on the table. Why were there so many people willing to join the Dark Moon Army? Aside from the fact that they were outstanding, the spoils of battle that they obtained by following the army into battle belonged to them. Oh, it changed when it came to him, and he had to hand it over. Bullshit. It was that bitch Ding Hu again. Flames of fury flickered in Ling Han's eyes. With the wealth of Ding Hu and the Ding clan, they naturally would not care about this tiny bit of spoils from the mountain bandits' lair. This was Ding Hu deliberately trying to disgust him. You, a severing mundane ancestor, did you really have the nerve to target a Genesis tier like this? How shameless could you be? However, what happened next was a twist. Ding Hu was actually transferred away and replaced by a deputy commander of the Long clan, called Long Gaofei. Chapter 1690. Ling Han immediately went to find Mao Shiyu. There was only one person who could influence the transfer of deputy commanders, and between different factions at that. Mao Dai, Great Commander Mao. That's right. I was the one who told father about the situation. Mao Shiyu nodded. No need to thank me. I just find that guy an eyesore. Hey, what severing mundane ancestor? Actually bullying people like that? She said angrily. Ling Han chuckled and said, I still have to thank you. You did me a great favor. Oh, that's right. Father said to visit him if you have time. Mao Shiyu continued. Ling Han faltered. He had been suppressed by Ding Hu, and no one was willing to follow him. If it were not for the rules, he would be no different from a single commander. He would only have the Empress as his subordinate, and they would have formed a husband and wife army. But even so, he was still ostracized. For example, Ding Hu had previously said that every captain would be rewarded with 10 star stones. The other 9 had all received them, and only he had not. Could he ask Ding Hu for them? He would definitely be humiliated by the latter. Even if Ling Han had displayed powerful strength in the previous battle to exterminate the bandits, and won the respect of his subordinates, the moment he returned to the campsite, everyone automatically drew a line between themselves and him. It couldn't be helped. Who dared be targeted by a severing mundane ancestor? Perhaps Ling Han would have a day where he could make a name for himself. But from the Genesis tier to the severing mundane tier, even the most awesome person would need tens of millions of years of accumulation. Could Ling Han really survive for such a long time? But just at this moment, Mao Dai actually wanted Ling Han to go sit with him. Though he said sit, it was tantamount to telling others that this brat, Mao Dai, was doing well. Who was Mao Dai? A third Severance elite, and an awesome character that was very likely to advance into the fourth Severance. If he supported Ling Han, what was Ding Hu? Could it be that the Ding clan would become hostile with Mao Dai because of this, and push him towards the other 2 great clans? Ling Han smiled and said, There's no time like the present, so let's do it today. Sure. Mao Shiyu nodded. Come with me. Father is also very curious about you, and feels that I'm exaggerating. You're not that powerful. The 2 of them exited the campsite. Originally, they couldn't just leave like this, but Mao Shiyu's status was special, and she casually used Mao Dai's name to scare the instructors into a daze, and they could only let them pass. Ding Hu had suddenly been replaced. Anyone could guess that this was Mao Dai's doing, since Lord Mao's gaze was already on them. Who wouldn't feel a chill in their hearts? That was a third Severance elite, and one with a boundless future ahead of him. In the future, he could advance into the fourth Severance, and stand side by side with the Grand Elders of the 3 great clans, becoming the strongest in Dark Moon City. Mao Dai was naturally overseeing the Dark Moon Army, and not in this small camp of the Reserve Army. The entire Dark Moon Army had a total of 9,000 people, and the Azure Dragon, White Tiger, and Vermilion Bird armies each had 3,000 people. Additionally, there were about 100 or so substitutes. Because the Dark Moon Army would lose some members every year, they needed to be replenished from the substitutes. And the source of the substitutes was naturally the Reserve Army. These substitutes were under the control of Zhang Chong. He was Mao Dai's only disciple, and had long since reached the peak stage of the Saint King tier. It was rumored that he had hopes of breaking through to the Severing Mundane tier, and was waiting for the opening of the Mortal Presence pool to use the Tao of Heaven and Earth there to sever his mortal bonds. Mao Shiyu led Ling Han into the army camp. The people here clearly recognized her, and they all nodded in acknowledgement when they arrived. There wasn't even a single question. True, Ling Han was only a great saint. Could it be that there would still be people worried that he would dare act recklessly here? There was a side courtyard in the army camp. It didn't look big on the outside, but it was a completely different world inside. There were mountains and lakes, and it was a paradise. This was a spatial god tool, but the god tool itself was relatively large and had been made into the shape of a courtyard. Junior sister. There was a person sitting at the entrance. When Mao Shiyu came over, he immediately sprang to his feet and swept a vigilant gaze over Ling Han, his words filled with meaning. This woman is mine, don't you snatch her from me. This person was Zhang Chong, Mao Dai's only disciple at present. Senior brother. Mao Shiyu called out sweetly. She saw this senior brother as her elder brother, because her father had always been infatuated with cultivation. It could be said that Zhang Chong had spent more time with her than Mao Dai had. Ling Han also smiled and said, "Greetings, brother Zhang." Zhang Chong revealed a hint of dissatisfaction. "You're only a great saint, while I'm a saint king. Even if I don't call him senior, I should at least call him Lord Zhang, right?" "Is father cultivating?" Mao Shiyu asked. "He has just finished cultivating, and is currently enjoying some tea." Zhang Chong looked at Mao Shiyu, and the dissatisfaction on his face immediately turned into a doting smile. "Count yourself lucky. Go on in," Mao Shiyu said to Ling Han, and then said to Zhang Chong, "Senior brother, I've encountered a bottleneck in my cultivation. Can you give me some advice?" Zhang Chong was initially slightly displeased, but when he heard Mao Shiyu say this sliver of displeasure immediately vanished. "What bottleneck?" Ling Han smiled. He could tell that not only did Zhang Chong like Mao Shiyu, even Mao Shiyu was filled with affection for this senior brother of his. It was just that this girl was a little slow when it came to emotions, and had not realized it at all. He entered into the courtyard, and there was a winding water corridor in front of him. There was a large lake with sparkling waves, and there was a green mountain in the distance that was enshrouded in mist, as if it were a celestial realm. Further away, a man was currently sitting and fishing while drinking tea, appearing incredibly leisurely. Ling Han walked over and arrived behind that man. He clasped his hands and said, "Ling Han greets senior." This was Mao Dai. It was merely a silhouette of his back, yet he was like an immovable mountain. Anyone who stood before him could only look up to him. A third Severance elite had really quickly merged with the heavenly Tao, and was indescribably strong. Mao Dai did not make a sound. After a long while, he finally raised his fishing rod, and a massive water snake was pulled out of the water by him. However, Ling Han shockingly realized that the water snake had horns and legs. This was not a snake, but rather a dragon. A true dragon, but one that could be ranked as the strongest divine beast in the ancient realm, was really not much different from a water snake in front of this elite. He easily lifted it up, removed it from the fishing hook, and casually tossed it back into the Great Lake. He smiled and said, "You naughty little guy, you know that I won't hurt you. How much of my fish feed have you eaten?" The true dragon flipped out of the water and splashed as if it was responding to him. Immediately, it dove back into the water and disappeared in the blink of an eye. This was a true dragon, but it was still very small. In the ancient realm, as long as a true dragon grew up normally, it would be a Genesis tier. But in the celestial realm, this level was higher. It was already a Genesis tier when it was still an infant dragon, and when it matured, it could possibly be a Severing mundane tier, or even stronger. The problem was, this was not something that could be resolved by bloodline. It had to go to a special place in the celestial realm to sever its mortal ties. Additionally, it was the same for advancing into the dividing soul tier, immortal palace tier, and so on. It had to be in a special place in the celestial realm to break through. Only now did Mao Dai turn around. Suddenly, it was as if the entire galaxy was rushing over. What Ling Han had arrived was definitely not a person, but rather the Tao of heaven and earth. It was only an instant, and this feeling disappeared. Mao Dai stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his azure robes fluttering. He was not tall, and his figure was on the thin side, giving off a gentle and refined feeling. "Young man, you are very extraordinary," Mao Dai said. Chapter 1692. Ling Han returned, and when he told the Empress of Mao Dai's words, the Empress was instantly overjoyed. What she treasured the most was naturally her relationship with Ling Han, which she definitely could not sever. This made her resolve to love Ling Han for the rest of her life, even if she did not advance into the severing mundane tier. However, there was actually another choice. Striking the heaven and earth was definitely more difficult than striking oneself, and the difficulty might not be just a little bit, but rather 10 or 100 times. But she could retain her relationship with Ling Han, and could also far surpass ordinary severing mundane tiers in battle prowess. For the incredibly proud Empress, this was her only choice, and also the best choice. Without Ding Hu's existence, Ling Han's days were naturally much better, but there were also many people who were very cautious, and still maintained their distance from Ling Han. Perhaps they would join the White Tiger Army in future? Training continued, but after only 5 days, Ling Han, Mao Shuyu, and the others were gathered together. Aside from Ding Xiaochen, who was not the captain, the other 9 were all. Long Gaofei sat down, glanced at the 10 people, and said, "Today, I have gathered you all together to have you participate in a competition. Your opponent is one of the Azure Dragon Army, White Tiger Army, and Vermilion Bird Army. Tukong." He paused and looked to the side. "You will explain the following details." "Yes, my lord." Tukong answered respectfully first, and then began to explain. As it turned out, there were a total of 237 one-star cities under the rule of the Black Moon sect. Every few hundred or 1,000 years, these forces under their rule would organize a team of 10 people to go to Black Moon City to participate in a competition limited to Genesis tiers. This was the so-called opportunity after joining the Dark Moon Army. If they could stand out and obtain the recognition of a certain higher-up of the Black Moon sect, they would have a chance to stay in a 2-star city, and in future, they might even have a chance to go to a 3-star city and be targeted by the Fu clan. However, usually, the 3 regular armies would directly fight, and after drawing lots, one team would be left out. The 2 teams that were drawn would fight first, and the winner would then fight the team that was left out. This final winner would be able to represent Dark Moon City in the competition. This time, for the sake of fairness, they decided to add one more team. However, it was obvious that no matter which of the 3 regular troops drew Ling Han's team, they would have a great advantage. The regular army will lose to the reserve army. Ling Han naturally did not think so. Perhaps there were geniuses among geniuses in the regular army, but compared to him, they were nothing. Unfortunately, the Empress could not participate. This time, only the captains of the 10 teams would be chosen. Then why was Ding Xiaochen allowed to come? The captain of his team said that he was not feeling well, so he gave up his spot. Thus Ding Xiaochen took up the spot. What discomfort! It was definitely because the Ding clan had used both kindness and intimidation to force that person to give up his spot. If they could win and represent the Dark Moon Army in battle, then each of them would be able to obtain 100 star stones as a reward. And if they could obtain a relatively good ranking in the Battle of Black Moon City, then the reward would be even more abundant. In fact, the 3 great clans had even announced that if they could obtain first place, each of them would be rewarded with a piece of 1-star pseudo-divine metal. One should not think that 1-star pseudo-divine metal was worthless. On the contrary, if one wanted to perfectly fuse 2 pieces of level 20 godly metal together, the cost of this was extremely high, and it would require a severing mundane tier elite to forge it day and night. Furthermore, not every severing mundane ancestor could do it. They had to have extremely high attainments in forging, and this determined that even 1-star pseudo-divine metal was incredibly valuable. To say nothing of the others, even Ding Xiaochen could not suppress his greed. If he could obtain a pseudo-celestial tool in the Genesis tier, how cool would that be? He knew his own limitations. At least 100 million more years of accumulation would be needed before he could possibly advance into the severing mundane tier. Thus, The temptation of a pseudo-celestial tool was naturally great. Otherwise, he would have to wait until he had advanced into the severing mundane tier before his clan would bestow a pseudo-celestial tool upon him. But there was a practical problem. How were they supposed to compete with the regular army? The latter had cultivated for innumerable years more than them, and had even better teamwork, able to completely unleash the battle prowess of 10 people, or even stronger. What about them? It had only been a few days, so what kind of teamwork could they develop? Furthermore, among those that could stand out in the regular army, which one of them was not an invincible elite in the Genesis tier? There was no limit to the Genesis tier. As long as the number of heavenly bodies reached 10 million, they would have completed the accumulation of origin power. And if their comprehension of cultivation level was also sufficient, they could attempt to break through to the severing mundane tier. Thus, their power could completely break through the limit of 10 million heavenly bodies, and cultivating for a few hundred million, or even a few billion more years, would still have a considerable advantage. Of course, after 10 million heavenly bodies, wanting to form new heavenly bodies would become more and more difficult. Just like how after Eternal River Tears had surpassed 1 million heavenly bodies, every step forward would be extremely difficult. Only prodigies could continue to advance triumphantly. With the gap in power, and the gap in teamwork, how could they have any hope of winning? Even Ding Xiaochen and Mao Shuyu were shaking their heads. They were only accompanying the crown prince in his studies, and did not have to consider the possibility of winning at all. After returning and making some preparations, they set out on their journey, heading towards the camp of the Dark Moon Army. Though they were the role of accompanying the crown prince in his studies, the other 3 teams were not, so they naturally had to choose their members well. This was a battle that would represent Dark Moon City, so the 3 great clans were also very concerned, and wanted to strive to obtain a good result. From a certain perspective, this was also a demonstration of the strength of a great city, and was of great importance. The battle would be held 3 days later, and taking advantage of these 3 days, Ling Han's reserve troops were also making last-minute preparations. Before the battle began, they would always hold on to a sliver of hope. But a mere 3 days' time, how could it be enough for them to work together into a single fist? To say nothing of anything else, merely based on the conflict between Ling Han and Ding Xiaochen, it was impossible for them to form a tacit understanding. 3 days later, they all entered the battlefield, their expressions filled with disappointment. They would just treat it as going through the motions. The 4 teams drew lots to decide their respective opponents. Ling Han's group was represented by Tu Kong, and the final result was that the Azure Dragon Army faced the Vermilion Bird Army, and the White Tiger Army faced the reserve troops. Seeing this result, the Ding clan and the White Tiger Army both smiled. This meant that they had already advanced. Unless the Azure Dragon Army and the Vermilion Bird Army had reached some kind of agreement, once they fought it out, no matter which team won, it could only be a Pyrrhic victory. If they faced the White Tiger Army again, they naturally could only lose. This kind of battle could not possibly alarm any powerful figures, but there were still 3 vice commanders that appeared. The severing mundane tier elite of the Ding clan was precisely Ding Hu. His eyes swept over Ling Han, and a flash of killing intent flashed past his eyes. A mighty severing mundane ancestor actually could not do anything to a mere great saint? Humph, if he did not kill this brat, where would his face be? Begin. The 4 teams entered the battlefield at the same time, and each team had 10 people. The rules were very simple. They would gang up on each other, until all the members of one side were defeated. Let's admit defeat, Ding Xiaochen immediately said. Since the opponent was his own team, he naturally hoped that the White Tiger Army would win as easily as possible. Chapter 1693. When Ding Xiaochen said this, he was immediately scorned by his companions. Was there anyone like you? You were practically a traitor. In reality, Ding Xiaochen had been specially transferred into this reserve army that was destined to lose, because he had a heavy responsibility. If they drew the White Tiger Army as their opponent, then Ding Xiaochen would persuade everyone to give up on the battle to save the White Tiger Army's strength. But what if they did not draw the White Tiger army? Then they had to do everything possible to raise everyone's morale for the battle and create as much trouble as possible for the opponent, so that the White Tiger army would have a chance to win. Though they were destined to lose, no matter what, they were still the elites chosen from the reserve army, and were enough to create some trouble for the regular army. Ling Han glanced at Ding Xiaochen disdainfully. If you don't want to fight, then scram. Don't be a hindrance here, and affect the morale of the army. If we were on the battlefield, I would directly take your head. Ding Xiaochen glared at Ling Han angrily, but did not retort. He had suffered at the hands of Ling Han, and knew that this guy not only had the ability to suppress him, but also dared to do this. Naturally, he did not dare to seek trouble for himself. He ignored Ling Han, and said to the others, I am doing this for your own good. Going to the battlefield to fight will inevitably result in injuries. Anyway, we will definitely lose, so why make things difficult for ourselves? I have some star stones here. I wonder if everyone is interested? This was equivalent to openly bribing them. Hearing him say this, a few captains immediately wavered, but there were also some who were unmoved. For example, Mao Shuyu, who was about to go mad from anger, while Wei Bo, Qin Hanyu, and Luo Xinyang were unmoved. It was unknown whether they felt that a few star stones were too little, or they were just in plain spoken. Scram! Ling Han's words were like spring thunder, and with a shout, Ding Xiaochen's face instantly paled, and blood flowed from his 7 orifices. Trash of the reserve army, are you going to surrender yourselves? Or do you want us to beat you until you cry for your parents? The 10 people from the White Tiger army surrounded them. They were all well-known figures in this army. All of them had been at the peak stage of Saint King for countless years, and formed an unimaginable number of stars. One of them said to Ding Xiaochen, Xiaochen, are you all right? 27th uncle, I'm fine. Ding Xiaochen wiped his face. Although he said that he was fine, he could not hide the shock on his face. He was actually bleeding from all of his orifices because of a single shout from Ling Han. Just how great was the gap between the two of them? He had thought that he could make up for this gap with just a little more effort. But now the gap was like 2 stars in the sky. It was simply unreachable. The one that Ding Xiaochen called 27th uncle was naturally also a member of the Ding clan. His name was Ding Sun, and he had already formed more than 20 billion stars. Though his comprehension level was still at the peak stage of Saint King, his power was overwhelming. His talent in martial art was actually not as high as Ding Xiaochen's. It was just that he had been born a few 100 million years earlier, and that was why his battle prowess surpassed Ding Xiaochen's. Ding Xiaochen was the next generation that the clan had focused on nurturing, and he was the most likely severing mundane ancestor to appear in the Ding clan. They definitely could not afford to lose him. How daring of that young man to actually dare to injure Ding Xiaochen. Beat him to death. Ding Sun said coldly. Since the White Tiger army belonged to the Ding clan, he was naturally also the leader of this representative team, though his battle prowess might not be the strongest. The others naturally would not be unconvinced, because joining the White Tiger army meant that they were members of the Ding clan. To put it bluntly, they were lackeys. The 10 members of the White Tiger team surrounded him. They had a set of joint attack techniques that could combine the power of the 10 of them, causing each person's battle prowess to increase by at least 3 times. This was extremely frightening. They were already the cream of the crop among peak stage Saint Kings, and to be able to increase their battle prowess by another 3 times. How powerful was this? A few people who did not have much fighting spirit immediately raised their hands to surrender, but Ding Xiaochen did not. He continued to put on an act as he fought, but not a single member of the White Tiger team attacked him. It was purely an act. Luo Xinyang attacked powerfully. He had the protection of the black scale armor, and his defensive power was extremely strong. He took on the role of the team's shield, turning into a sharp spear that pierced into the White Tiger team, wanting to destroy the opponent's formation. Otherwise, if everyone's battle prowess was increased by 3 times, how could they fight? Meanwhile, Qin Hanyu unleashed the power of darkness, but this celestial technique of hers did not differentiate between friend and foe at all. Even her own people were injured, scaring everyone into dodging. Meanwhile, Weibo's figure flashed, as if he could turn invisible. In the blink of an eye, he had already advanced several meters. Sword ray spat out, like a venomous snake launching a lightning strike. Only Ling Han stood with his hands clasped behind his back, like a pillar of support. Shwa shwa shwa. Immediately, 6 battle spears pierced over. They were all forged from level 20 godly metal, and the tips of the spears glowed, exuding an astonishing cold air. Ling Han punched out. Ding 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 ding. He was using his physical body to meet these battle spears head-on. Dazzling sparks flew wildly. With each punch that landed, the tip of a battle spear would be shattered by him. After 6 punches, the 6 battle spears had become 6 metal rods. Witnessing this scene, the surrounding Dark Moon Army soldiers, who were watching the battle, all felt a chill run down their spines. What kind of fuck you physique was this? It was terrifying. He was using his bare hands to fight a top-grade god tool head-on. But it was actually the god tool that had been shattered. No. This was no longer as simple as a tough physique, but rather battle prowess that had reached an inconceivable level. Otherwise, the most he could do was ensure that he would not be wounded. Freak, an absolute freak. On the high platform, the severing mundane ancestors of the Long clan and Duan clan opened their eyes at the same time, staring at Ling Han. They naturally had spies in the reserve army. The 10 instructors belonged to the 3 great clans, and they had also heard reports that a 3.5-star aptitude prodigy had appeared in the reserve army this time. The 2 great clans had already prepared a plan to recruit him, and they had even added fuel to the fire in the matter of Mao Dai transferring Ding Hu away. Otherwise, with their control over the Dark Moon Army, even if Mao Dai wanted to forcefully carry out this order, it could not possibly be accomplished so quickly. But now that they saw Ling Han show his might with their own eyes, they knew that they had still underestimated Ling Han's natural talent. The original plan had been scrapped, and this young man was worthy of them paying a greater price to fight for him. The Ding clan was really a joke. They actually did not fight for such a young king tier, and instead actively pushed him to the opposite side. They were practically idiots. That was good. And it was precisely because of this idiot from the Ding clan that they would have one less opponent when fighting for Ling Han. However, they still had to be on guard against the Ding clan harming them. After all, Genesis tiers were too weak, and if a severing mundane ancestor wanted to make a move, there were really 10,000 ways that they could do so. On the battlefield, the 10 members of the White Tiger team were also scared stiff by this frightening strength of Ling Han. Was this really a new recruit? Some of them had long since represented Dark Moon City to participate in the tournament of Black Moon City. They could only imagine that perhaps only the young prodigies of the Black Moon sect could possibly possess this kind of battle prowess. Ding Sun's eyes were sinister, and he cast a look at Ding Xiaochen. The latter immediately nodded. Chapter 1694. Ding Xiaochen still had a second mission. If he could not persuade him, then he would act as a spy and stab him in the back. I'm your teammate, so will you be on guard against me? Ding Xiaochen stared at Ling Han's back, his gaze cold. This person had caused him to lose all face, and had to be eliminated. Otherwise, this would become a thorn in his heart, and it would be even more fatal when he was advancing to the severing mundane tier. Not only would it affect his breakthrough, it would even cause him to be wounded by the Great Tao. Breaking through was an incredibly dangerous matter in the first place. So how could he pass it if his Tao heart was not stable? Now that everyone was engaged in a fierce battle, how could Ling Han possibly think that his teammate would turn around and attack him? Oh, settle the score after the fact. Sorry, this was a chaotic battle, and we had only worked together for a few days, so wasn't it very normal that we did not have good teamwork? At worst, he would just receive some punishment, and it would be fine. With the Ding clan interfering, it would definitely be a big problem, and a small problem would definitely be resolved. He had not done it on purpose, right? Ding Xiaochen drew out the green wooden saber, his murderous aura boiling, and the image of a man-eating tree appeared. This was a spiritual form, and its might was not the slightest bit weak. He activated it with all his might, and when the might of the divine saber was maximized, he suddenly moved, slashing out towards a member of the White Tiger team. That person had long since understood, and immediately leaped towards Ling Han's direction. In this way, Ding Xiaochun's saber was openly slashing towards Ling Han's back. When the saber light was about to reach Ling Han, Ding Xiaochun finally shouted loudly, "Careful! Be careful, sister!" When they saw this scene, the surrounding Azure Dragon Army and Vermilion Bird Army almost started cursing. "This act of yours was too fake, wasn't it? This saber was clearly slashing towards Ling Han, and you actually pretended to call out 'be careful,' really treating the others like monkeys. At such a short distance, how could Ling Han dodge?" No one arrived, and a cold smirk appeared at the corners of Ling Han's lips. Ding Xiaochun's rebellion was already within his expectations. Otherwise, there would be no benefit in participating in such a competition, and they would only suffer a crushing defeat. Why would the other party come forward? However, with the strength of Ling Han's present abilities, it was fine even if he had not anticipated it beforehand. Although he had taken on 7 opponents by himself, and had taken on the majority of the firepower of the White Tiger team, in truth, he was still at ease, and had not displayed his full battle prowess. A blade slashed over. Before the blade arrived, the tree soul had already wrapped itself around Ling Han's body, wanting to invade his body and devour his soul. If Ling Han's divine soul was seized, it would be impossible for him to avoid the next attack. That was a top-notch divine tool. Which Saint King would be able to withstand it? If you used your fists to shatter a divine artifact, then you might have used some kind of technique to protect your fists. But if your soul is seized, how can you use your technique? A hint of a vengeful smile appeared at the corners of Ding Xiaochun's lips. After this strike, even if Ling Han did not die, he would be severely injured. The saber slashed down. Ling Han suddenly turned around. Clang! He stretched out his hand, and grabbed the green wooden blade in his hand. A mocking smile appeared at the corners of his lips, and he suddenly pushed. Crack, crack, crack. The sound of bones shattering rang out, and the bones in both of Ding Xiaochun's arms were all shattered. He was completely unable to resist the mighty force exerted by Ling Han. At this moment, Ding Xiaochun's expression was really very interesting. Not only was it filled with pain, it was also filled with shock. In his eyes, this was something that definitely should not have happened. Even so, he had still suffered a crushing defeat. Pooh! The green wooden blade flew back, and the blunt hilt of the blade struck against his chest. Once again, the sound of bones breaking could be heard. The Saint King's skin defense was practically useless, and the hilt of the blade had directly pierced through his flesh and into his chest, creating a huge bloody hole. A vicious glint flashed past in Ling Han's eyes, but he did not follow up with another strike. He calmly said, "Harming others is harming yourself in the end. Aren't you afraid that if you do too many shameful things, ghosts will come knocking at your door in the middle of the night?" Pa! Ding Xiaochun sat down on the ground, his head covered with cold sweat, his face as pale as paper. His heart had been forcefully blasted by the green wooden blade, and a large amount of divine blood gushed out. This caused a great loss to his life force, and directly affected the time he could break through to the severing mundane tier. But if it was not for the fact that Ling Han did not follow up with another punch, he would not be a matter of injury now, but already dead. Audacious villain, Ding Hu leaped to his feet, and was about to strike out at Ling Han. "Brother Ding Hu, why be angry?" The severing mundane tier Grand Elder of the Long clan, Long Chungren, asked calmly, but his palm swept out, sealing off the path of Ding Hu's attack. The severing mundane tier Grand Elder of the Duan clan, Duan 1, also stood up, crossed his arms over his chest and smilingly said, "This is a tournament, so it is inevitable that there will be casualties. Furthermore, this is only a minor injury." Minor injury? Even his heart had been blasted, and it was still a minor injury. The heart, to cultivators, was the place where blood essence was stored. This was the reason why there was the saying of heart blood. If this heart was blasted, the blood essence would definitely be completely drained, and even his life force would be severely injured. Ding Hu's expression was livid, but the two great severing mundane tier Grand Elders had clearly expressed that if he made a move, they would definitely make him pay. so he had no choice but to suppress his anger. If it was only one, then he would not be afraid. But two severing mundane tier grand elders, He sat back down heavily and lowered his gaze. That was a gaze that could kill. And any Genesis tier that was swept by his gaze would only be shattered into pieces. The others were also in an uproar. They had completely not thought that there would be such a dramatic turn of events. They all thought that this time, even if Ling Han did not die, he would be severely injured, but in the blink of an eye, the one who was severely injured was Ding Xiaochen. Since you are injured, then obediently go to one side and rest. Ling Han shot out a foot. Pung! Ding Xiaochen was instantly kicked out by him, and turned into a rubber ball. He rolled a dozen or so times before finally coming to a stop. The pitiful Ding Xiaochen had already been severely injured in the first place. And with this, he was angry, embarrassed, and in pain. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and directly fainted. Ling Han cracked a smile at the 10 members of the White Tiger team, that were already stunned, and said, "Why are you so polite? Not fighting anymore. Polite your sister. Who wanted to be polite with you? That was because they were frightened, all right? Were you really a fuck Saint King? Were you really a fuck you recruit? Why did you feel like you were a few hundred times fiercer than the veterans?" Taking advantage of the moment when they were stunned, Mao Shuyu, Wei Bo, and the others took the chance to move. Pung pung pung, they instantly knocked down 3. And the remaining 7 completely lost their courage. As long as Ling Han was still standing there, who could match him? The White Tiger team admitted defeat. At first, this battle was thought to be without any suspense and completely one-sided. In reality, there was indeed no suspense, and it was completely one-sided, but the victor and loser of the two sides had exchanged. The preliminary corps actually defeated the regular army. Everyone's gazes were focused on Ling Han. It was this man who had single-handedly created this miracle. Ding, whose expression was dark, and his hands were clenched tightly. Veins could be seen popping out on his forehead. And his knuckles were also clenched so tightly that cracking sounds could be heard. At this moment, his killing intent towards Ling Han had also boiled to the extreme. "We won!" Mao Shuyu suddenly cheered. Among the few of them, her personality was the most fiery and lively, unlike Wei Bo and the others who could keep their composure. However, this was an unexpected victory, and it caused Wei Bo and the others to also reveal a slight smile. Previously, the few members who had already cried out loudly in surrender before the battle had expressions of embarrassment, but could not conceal their wild joy. As long as they had Ling Han's divine bravery, representing Dark Moon City in battle, was completely no problem at all. Even if you had an endless lifespan, if you were unable to maintain the progress of your cultivation, then you would still be taken back by the heavens and earth. Mao Dai has a disciple who is quite interested in Mao Dai's little girl, Ding Yaolong suddenly said. "Ancestor, your intention is to think of a way for Mao Dai's disciple to marry the Mao family's daughter?" asked Ding Hu respectfully. Thus, it was impossible for Ling Han to form an unbreakable alliance with Mao Dai. Ding Yaolong smiled faintly and said, "No, think of a way to make Ling Han and the little girl from the Mao family happy." All the big shots looked at each other, confused. Weren't they afraid that Mao Dai and Ling Han would end up together? The two of them had 3.5 stars aptitude, and together, they would be able to defy the heavens. Clap, clap, clap. Someone clapped and laughed. "Brilliant, truly brilliant. Ancestor's move is truly superb." The other big shots all walked towards that person. "Even if you want to suck up, you don't have to be so mushy, right?" That person explained. "The most important thing is that Mao Dai's disciple seems to be called Zhang Chong, and he is very interested in the little girl from the Mao family. If we can make that despicable brat Ling Han defile the little girl from the Mao family, what do you think Zhang Chong will do?" "Of course he will kill that brat," someone immediately answered. "Haha. Didn't this cause an internal strife between Mao Dai and Ling Han? Even if Mao Dai felt that the rice had already been cooked, so he might as well make the best of the mistake. Would Zhang Chong be able to tolerate this? It was said that this guy would very likely advance into the Severing Mundane tier, after the Severing Mundane pool. At that time, killing Ling Han would be a matter of stretching out his hand. Hee 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 hee. These big shots all laughed. This could be said to be killing two birds with one stone. As for how much harm Mao Shuyu would suffer in this matter, how could it be within the consideration of these people? In their eyes, there was only benefit. For the sake of benefit, they could even sacrifice their own clansmen. What more an outsider? We will execute this plan after Zhang Chong has severed the mundane to ensure that there are no mistakes. Under Ling Han's strong request, the Empress was allowed to travel with him to Black Moon City. How could he not bring her along? Right now, Ling Han and the Ding clan were like fire and water. And if he left like this, what if the Ding clan did something to harm the Empress? In front of a severing mundane ancestor, the Empress would not have the ability to resist no matter how much of a prodigy she was. Ling Han did not want something that he would regret for the rest of his life to happen. Even if the Empress became a deserter, he would have to bring her along with him in the Black Tower. Thankfully, the great commander of the Dark Moon Army was Mao Dai. Though his authority had been stripped away, he still had this bit of face. True enough, Duan Jun dragged Ling Han out for a drink, and even invited over a dozen delicate beauties from a few small clans in the city. They were very open, and when they saw Ling Han and Duan Jun, they called them Brother Han and Brother Jun, looking as if they were willing, as long as they were willing. Duan Jun was unrestrained and unrestrained, embracing beauties on both sides and taking advantage of them. However, he did not overdo it, and did not have any deep interaction with these women, causing these delicate young ladies to feel very resentful. Ling Han was even more direct, looking as cold as if he wanted to keep everyone at arm's length. To be honest, even if he was a lustful person, with an exquisite beauty like the Empress, would he still be interested in these common women? Duan Jun was still quite a good person. He was incredibly forthright, and did not beat around the bush with his words, which suited Ling Han very well. Thus, the two of them conversed happily, and drank to their heart's content. After preparing for 10 days, the 10 members of the reserve army set out, and under Long Gaofei's lead, they headed towards Black Moon City. They boarded a large ship. Otherwise, the time needed to travel on foot would be far too long. This was the celestial realm, and the bit of speed of Genesis Tears was really not enough. The large ship was too massive. It was 30,000 meters long, and also several thousand meters wide. If it was erected, it would be a towering mountain, but placed in this great river that was comparable to an ocean, it was not the slightest bit eye-catching. Great waves crashed over, and the hull of the ship shook. That kind of power caused even Ling Han's expression to change slightly. This could definitely pose a threat to his godly bones. Chapter 1697. Great waves crashed against the hull of the ship, causing the ship to shake violently every time. Even if Mao Shuyu, Wei Bo, and the others were all at the consummate level of the Genesis tier, they still felt dizzy and uncomfortable, wanting to vomit. Ling Han and the Empress were fine. They could hide in the Black Tower once they locked the door, so they didn't care if they were wild or not. The other person who lived in seclusion was Ding Xiaochen. Not only had he lost to Ling Han time and time again, he had even publicly undermined him. How could he have the face to face everyone else? However, he was quite thick-skinned, and had still come with a thick face. That was because this was also an opportunity for him. Black Moon City, a 2-star city. Don't say that there was only a gap of 1 level between 1 and 2 stars, and that there was only a gap of 1 level between Celestial King tier and Ascending Origin tier. But how wide was the actual gap? If he encountered a dividing soul tier elite in Black Moon City, who took a liking to him, and wanted to take him as a son-in-law or disciple, then wouldn't he be soaring through the ranks? Theoretically, his highest achievement was only the 3rd severance, but if there was a dividing soul tier elite willing to support him, the possibility of him reaching the 4th severance was very high. The difference of a single severance could be the difference of 10 billion years of lifespan, and he could withstand the immortal's tribulation many times. Thus, even if Ding Xiaochen suffered the disdain of everyone, he would not give up on this opportunity. The great ship sailed extremely quickly, and could match the speed of Ling Han's full sprint. If they did not stop midway, they would only need about a month to reach Black Moon City. However, this great ship was not specially used to send Ling Han and his group, but was also responsible for transportation. When they arrived at the next city, a great deal of goods were moved off the ship, and a great deal of goods were moved onto the ship, and then headed for the next city. With this delay, the journey would take up 2 months' time. Under the reincarnation tree, Ling Han continued to comprehend the regulations. In the celestial realm, the spiritual qi was incredibly abundant. At least before celestial level, it could guarantee that a cultivator's advancement speed would be maintained at an astonishingly high level. Of course, the prerequisite was that their comprehension of regulations could keep up. Otherwise, no matter how good the cultivation environment was, it would be useless. And with the help of the reincarnation tree, it was equivalent to giving Ling Han wings to soar. After entering the celestial realm for so many days, he had already reached the peak of the Great Saint tier. As long as he accumulated more origin power and settled his comprehension, he would be able to break through to the Saint King tier. At that time, he believed that as long as they were at the same cultivation level, he would be able to suppress all of them. He was still drinking the lightning tribulation liquid and comprehending the laws of lightning, turning them into his own divine ability. Of course, he also left some for the Empress and the others. Because of their physique, the others could only consume it after they advanced into the severing mundane tier. Moreover, Ling Han only planned to give it to the Empress and the Rain Emperor, because they were extremely talented in martial art. If he gave it to others, that would really be biting off more than they could chew. Instead, it would drag down their cultivation level, and that would be too much of a waste. Ling Han deepened his comprehension of the exterminating lightning, and his destructive power became more and more terrifying. But his lightning flash did not improve. Instead, he gained another mystical power, and Ling Han called it Cracking Light Ball. He could shoot out a ball of lightning, and then control it to explode as he wished, creating a frightening destructive power that would strike all the targets in the surroundings. But he would not be able to distinguish between friend and foe, because this was an attack that had already been shot out. However, if he wanted to use this move, he would need to accumulate the regulations of lightning in the surroundings. The longer he accumulated it, the greater its might, but it could not surpass a certain upper limit. Otherwise, it would explode by itself before it could be used. The Empress's progress was even faster than his, but she was still slightly stuck by the barrier of the Saint King tier. She would probably break through before him, but it would not be much faster than him. 2 months later, the large ship safely arrived at Black Moon City. Ling Han stood at the bow of the ship and looked at the large city that had suddenly appeared in front of him. He couldn't help but be shocked, because this large city was floating in the air. Why did it look like a huge planet? And there were even smaller planets orbiting around it. However, upon closer inspection, those weren't small planets, but rather massive asteroids. They looked like floating islands, and each one of them had huge buildings built on top of it. It was a magnificent sight to behold. Black Moon City was above, and there was another city on the ground that was astonishingly large, enough to rival Dark Moon City, but compared to Black Moon City, it was pitifully small. This was the secondary city of Black Moon City. Usually, whether it was merchant groups or visitors, they all had to apply to enter the city from this secondary city. Only after the application was approved would there be a special way to head to the main city. If one directly flew up without permission, they would just be waiting to be blasted into smithereens. There were not so many rules when entering the secondary city. It was just that one had to pay to stay in an inn, pay to eat, and pay for everything. This money was not gold or silver but star stones. They first found an inn to stay in. Even if they were representing Dark Moon City to participate in the battle, they still had to write an application to enter the city. After going through many layers of approval, it would take at least 10 days. Since they had come, they might as well take a look around. Don't say that this was only a secondary city, but the food and entertainment here were a few levels higher than in Dark Moon City. For example, as long as you could afford the price, you could even eat immortal beast meat. Ling Han very much wanted to try immortal beast meat, but after understanding the price, he gave up on the idea. 20,000 star stones per plate, and there were only 7 or 8 slices of meat on each plate, not much thicker than a piece of paper. According to rumors, eating immortal beast meat could greatly increase one's accumulation of origin power, and one could even obtain celestial-level fragments of great Tao that could help them comprehend regulations. This was really good stuff, but the price was also ridiculously high. How many people could afford to eat it? Even a first severance grand elder like Long Gaofei could only obtain 100 star stones every year if he did not earn any extra income. If he wanted to eat a meal of immortal beast meat, he would have to wait a whole 200 years. Forget it, he would come back to eat when he had money in the future. Young lady, what an alluring figure. Just when Ling Han and the Empress were planning to leave, they heard a vulgar voice behind them. That was a young man that only looked to be in his 20s. Take off the veil on your face. If I am satisfied, I will even treat you to immortal beast meat. The Empress shot a glance at him and wagged her finger, meaning get lost. I can't be bothered to speak with you. Her slender hand was soft and supple, and her fingers were like spring onions, incredibly alluring. The young man's eyes were fixed on her, and he couldn't help but stretch out a hand to touch the Empress's soft hand, and said, "Young lady, let me touch your hand. My bone-touching technique is extraordinarily accurate." The Empress frowned and pressed out a hand. Pung! A great force surged over, and the young man instantly turned into a ball, rolling backwards. He only stopped after crashing through a great many walls. His limbs were already drooping, and he had fainted. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, let's go to other places for a stroll." They did not take this matter to heart. Thinking about it, this young man could not possibly be a descendant of some noble clan of Black Moon City. Otherwise, he would not have come to the secondary city. The most likely possibility was that he had come with his seniors to participate in the tournament of Black Moon City. Chapter 1698. Ling Han and the Empress wandered around the secondary city, learning some information about Black Moon City. In truth, it was not easy to enter into a city of 2 stars and above. It was not something that could be done just by paying the entrance fee. Of course, the entrance fee still had to be paid, but there had to be a special reason. For example, if you were a resident of the city, or if you were invited, you could not enter the city as you pleased. Even businessmen could not enter Black Moon City, and could only hand over their goods in the secondary city. It was said that the cultivation environment of Black Moon City was 10 times that of Dark Moon City. If the gates were open, then even if Black Moon City was incredibly huge, it would definitely be overcrowded. However, this kind of restriction also had another purpose, and that was to highlight the lofty position of a 2-star city. If anyone could enter the imperial palace, what dignity would there be left to speak of? There was immortal substance in the celestial realm, and as long as one advanced into the severing mundane tier, and could survive the immortal's tribulation again and again, theoretically, they would possess an endless lifespan. And in truth, this had great benefits for everyone. Because they breathed in undying matter at all times, it existed in their bodies for a long time. So everyone's lifespan was much longer than the living beings of the ancient realm. In this place, even those who had never cultivated could live up to 500 or 600 years, and Genesis tiers could even live up to 5 or 6 billion years. Black Moon City had a great formation that gathered spiritual chi and immortal substance from all directions. If one stayed in the city for a long time, aside from advancing rapidly in cultivation, their lifespan would also be longer. Wasn't cultivation a competition against the heavens for lifespan? These reasons added together caused 2-star city to be a place that everyone would flock to like ducks. Even a rich second generation like Ding Xiaochen racked his brains to squeeze in. Furthermore, this was only a 2-star city. What about a 3-star city? A 4-star city? A 5-star city? After walking around enough, Ling Han and the Empress headed back to their inn. However, they had only walked halfway when they were blocked by a woman with a fierce aura. "It's you who beat my younger brother." This woman was brimming with killing intent, and her appearance was very moving. She belonged to the category of top-grade beauties, but of course she could not compare to the Empress. "Sister, it's them who beat me." There was a young man beside her, his face bruised and swollen, as he pointed angrily at Ling Han and the Empress. This was precisely the guy who had tried to take liberties with the Empress previously, yet had been sent flying with a single slap from the Empress. This pair of brother and sister were quite interesting, as they complemented each other. The woman snorted and said, "Each of you cut off one of your arms and kowtow to my younger brother as an apology, and I will spare your lives." "Big sister, I want that woman." The young man pointed at the Empress. Although he had never seen the Empress's true appearance, just the sight of the Empress's alluring figure was enough to ignite a fire in his heart. He was determined to take her for himself. A doting look flashed across the woman's face. She nodded and said, all right. We'll do as Bauer says." She then looked at Ling Han, and Li Muan frowned. "What are you two still standing there for?" Ling Han couldn't help but shake his head and said, "Are you all idiots? Idiots aren't afraid. But if you know that you're idiots and still run around, then that's your fault." "Sly mouth," the woman rebuked, and sent a slap flying towards Ling Han. His present physique had also reached the level of half-star pseudo-divine metal, so he was not afraid of this kind of head-on clash. Boom, boom, boom. The power of his fists and the sword chi clashed. Every time they collided, there would be a dazzling light, as if they were splitting open the heavens and splitting the earth. After a few moves, Ling Han let loose. If the might of this divine sword could be used to its fullest, then it would indeed be enough to match him. Unfortunately, a tool was a tool, after all, so how could it compare to a human? He advanced forcefully, and easily snatched the sword from the other's hands. He casually put it away, then sealed the other's cultivation level, and picked him up. The young man wanted to run, but Ling Han caught up with him in a single step, and similarly picked him up. After Lu Muyu herself was captured, she acted like a fierce and barbaric woman, still baring her fangs and brandishing her claws. But when the young man was captured, she was so frightened that her face turned pale, and she screamed, "Let go of my younger brother! If you dare touch a single hair on him, I will kill you. I swear, I will kill you." Ling Han shook his hand, and a series of crisp cracking sounds rang out. At least 1/3 of the bones in Lu Bao's body had been shattered. He turned towards the young man, and the latter was so frightened that his face turned pale. He couldn't help but shiver, and the crotch of his pants became wet. He had actually peed his pants in fear. "Don't kill me! Don't kill me!" the young man screamed. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, "Don't worry, I'm not a butcher, and I don't know how to kill pigs. But since you like to bully and humiliate women so much, I'll let you have a taste of it." When he was strolling around just now, he had come to a brothel that was specially opened for men with special hobbies, and it was filled with gorgeously dressed men. As for Lu Muyu, just as he had said before, she would be sent to the bachelors. Chapter 1700. Participating teams could not bet on their own team's victory or defeat, but they could bet on other teams. Of course, it was completely possible to bet on themselves as the champion. This was impossible to cheat. They could bet in the relay station. Ling Han and the Empress both bet their entire wealth on Dark Moon City, with the odds being 122. Presently this was the odds, but after they had fought one round, this odds would at least drop to within 1/5. Hence, they had to bet early. Mao Shuyu and the others were all filled with confidence in Ling Han, and all took out their entire wealth to bet on Dark Moon City. To the staff of the gambling house, this was completely normal. Any participating team would basically bet on themselves to win the championship. This was a kind of confidence. Unfortunately, it was destined that only one team could charge out and win the championship. Not long after, Long Gaofei also ran over to place a bet. He was a severing mundane ancestor, so this was a big move, actually placing a bet of 100,000 in one go. This was probably not his personal wealth, but rather a bet placed on behalf of the 3 great clans. When they returned, it would definitely be distributed evenly. This time, your chances of victory are very high. However, you must not be careless, Long Gaofei said solemnly. Long Gaofei said solemnly. I just obtained the detailed information of some teams. A few of them are very powerful. According to the rules of the past, the top 8 of the previous tournament would automatically enter into the finals, and the remaining teams would have to fight for the 24 spots in the finals. Being able to stand out from over 200 teams, these top 8 teams were naturally incredibly strong. The champion of the last tournament was Double Extreme City. Their previous strength could only enter into the finals, but a supreme prodigy called Yuan Xingping had appeared in the last tournament. In the last tournament, it was precisely he who had led Double Extreme City into the finals alone, and won the championship in one go. Now this Yuan Xingping had yet to advance into the Severing Mundane tier. But not long from now, the Severing Mundane pool would open, and he had over 90% confidence that he would become a Severing Mundane ancestor there. Thus, this tournament might be his last time appearing on the stage in the Genesis tier. Yuan Xingping was determined to win this championship. It was rumored that a big shot of the Black Moon sect had already extended an olive branch to him. As long as he advanced into the Severing Mundane tier, he would take him as a disciple, and he needed to perform as perfectly as possible. Outside of Double Extreme City was the veteran powerhouse, White Sun City. They had always been a frequent participant in the top 4, and in the recent few tournaments, they had even fought their way into the finals, becoming the champions of the previous 2 tournaments. This team did not have a super genius like Yuan Xingping, but everyone's strength was very average, and their teamwork was also very good. Perhaps they could pull Double Extreme City down this time. The top 8 teams were not to be underestimated, but there was another team outside the top 8 that needed to be taken seriously, and that was Blue Flame City, because they had also produced an unparalleled genius named Dan Yujing. She was hailed as the second Yuan Xingping, which showed how highly she was regarded. Like Yuan Xingping, her individual strength was incomparably tyrannical, and it was said that she had the courage to fight 100 people alone. However, such a competition was ultimately a battle of 10 people. If their teammates were too weak, they could still die with a grudge. There were still 10 days before the official competition would begin. The teams would first draw lots and be grouped into groups. In the first round, there would be a large number of teams that would get a bye. The 37 teams would be unlucky. Ling Han and the others were quite lucky, getting a bye in the first round. In order to ensure the relative fairness of the competition, lots would be drawn again after every round of battle, so they still did not know who their opponents were. Ling Han, Mao Shiyu Wei Bo, and the others came over. Because of the matter with Ding Xiaochen, there was a clear split in the team of 10. Ling Han, Mao Shiyu, Wei Bo, Qin Henyu, and Luo Xinyang had clearly formed a small team, while Ding Xiaochen was closer to the remaining 4. What is it? Ling Han was currently sipping tea with the Empress in the courtyard. This was naturally brewed from the leaves of the reincarnation tree. The fragrance of the tea wafted, forming multiple patterns of great Tao. With the present state of the reincarnation tree, even a severing mundane ancestor would be tempted by such tea leaves. Ling Han stretched out a hand, and regulations spread out, blocking the patterns of great Tao that the reincarnation tea exuded. One should not show one's wealth. He did not want to be targeted by more severing mundane ancestors. Mao Shiyu and the others did not suspect anything, and said, "Come quickly, there is a test outside. As long as you meet the standards, you can go to Celestial Clouds Island tomorrow night." Celestial Clouds Island. Celestial Clouds Island is a large meteorite that surrounds Black Moon City. That is the residence of the current holy son of the Black Moon sect. Mao Shiyu's eyes were filled with stars. This holy son is a prodigy that rarely appears, even in countless eras. It is said that he has formed 10 million stars in the Eternal River tier, and is a legend. 10 million stars. Ling Han's heart suddenly moved. This was really a proud accomplishment, and could be ranked with him, the Empress, and the Rain Emperor. It was said that this kind of prodigy could only be achieved by the holy sons and holy daughters of great sections. Logically speaking, the Black Moon sect was still not qualified to be called a great sect. At least, it had to be an immortal palace tier force to be barely worthy. For a 2-star force to produce such a prodigy was indeed extraordinary. This holy son is called Changsun Liang. It is said that he is only over 100,000 years old this year, yet has already obtained sufficient comprehension of cultivation level. He only has to wait for the Severing Mundane pool to open, and he will be able to advance to the Severing Mundane tier. Mao Shiyu continued. Obviously, she had done her homework, and was a hardcore supporter of this holy son. It was unknown whether Zhang Chong would turn green with jealousy when he saw this scene. Luo Taiyang nodded, and said, "The Severing Mundane pool is the best place for Severing Mundane tier, in the area governed by the Black Moon sect. If one successfully severs the mundane there, when he advances into the Severing Mundane tier in the future, he would be much stronger than his peers. Unfortunately, there is still a very long time before we can break through to the Severing Mundane tier. If we miss out on the opening of the Severing Mundane pool this time, we would have to wait another 10 million years." Qin Hanyu shook her head. Even if they were already peak stage Saint Kings, being stuck for a few 100 million years, or 1 or 2 billion years, from Saint King to Severing Mundane tier was a small matter. Ling Han was slightly interested in this holy son, and asked, "What kind of test is needed?" "Come, it's very simple." These people pulled Ling Han up, but none of them dared to have any intimate contact with the Empress, because the Empress's might was too strong, and they did not dare to get close to her at all. The Empress followed, and the 6 of them came outside. They saw that a pillar had appeared at some unknown time, at the entrance of the relay station, and there were multiple holes on it. When they arrived, someone just so happened to be attacking this copper pillar. With a wung, rows of holes lit up. There were a total of 4 rows, and each row had 10 holes, while the 5th row only had 3 holes that lit up. 43 holes, and he can just barely be called an elite, but he is still not qualified to ascend to Celestial Clouds Island. Beside the copper pillar, there was a young man currently sitting in a cross-legged position, making his evaluation. He had a head full of red hair, and was very eye-catching. The person who had just attacked was unconvinced, and said, "I have also been here for a long time, and the previous people only managed to hit 30 holes, and I hit 40, and it is still not enough." "Not enough." The red-haired young man shook his head. "You are not even as good as me, and you still want to obtain the Lord Holy Son's favor?" He did not stand up, and casually threw a punch at the stone pillar. Wung, instantly multiple rows of holes lit up, and there were actually more than 50 holes. The difference was obvious. Firstly, he was attacking from a distance, and secondly, he was only sitting, and this was only a casual attack. If he used his full strength, he could probably hit 60 holes, or even 70 holes. Chapter 1701. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Even a follower of Changsun Liang was so awesome. So just how strong was that holy son? The red-haired young man swept his eyes over the crowd, a hint of a sneer at the corner of his lips, and said, "With a single strike from Lord Holy Sun, 99 of these 100 holes will light up simultaneously." Hiss, 99. Everyone's mouths gaped wide, appearing incredibly shocked. Most of them had tried, and even if the gap in strength was extremely large, the number of holes reflected was only 1 or 2, and the total number was over 30, with a difference of 60 holes. How great was the gap in battle prowess? It was practically unimaginable. This was the strength of the Holy Son of the Black Moon sect, so powerful that others did not even have the right to look up to him. Then, how many holes do we need to light up to ascend to Celestial Clouds Island? Someone suddenly asked in the crowd. That was a very ordinary-looking young man, and was shorter than the average person by half a head, so only his voice could be heard. However, after he said this, those in front of him all moved aside, making him stand out. The red-haired young man walked over, and his pupils involuntarily contracted, as a chill rose up from the bottom of his heart. His whole body bounced up from the ground, and he entered into a guarded state. It was as if he was not a person, but rather a primordial beast. Those that could appear here were all top prodigies. Seeing this, they were all shocked. The red-haired young man was actually scared to such an extent. Could it be that this short young man was very strong? They did not come out because they were not strong enough. For example, Ling Han nodded internally. This short young man's strength was definitely above that of the red-haired young man. 70 holes. And you have the right to ascend to Celestial Clouds Island. The red-haired young man wiped the cold sweat on his forehead before answering. Then, he glanced at the short young man, his eyes filled with wariness. The short young man nodded and smilingly said, "Then let me try." He walked out and arrived in front of the copper pillar. Then he paused, turned his head and asked, "How many times can I try?" 3 times. The red-haired young man broke out in a cold sweat again. He felt that the feeling of being stared at by the other was like being stared at by a terrifying great beast. It was too frightening. The short young man smiled, clenched his right hand into a fist, and very casually punched at the copper pillar. One row after row of holes lit up. All 7 rows lit up, and one in the 8th row also lit up. 71 eyes. Everyone was shocked. It turned out that there really were people who could reach the battle prowess of more than 70 eyes. They couldn't do it, because they were far from being strong enough. "How should I address you, sir?" In front of such power, the red-haired youth became respectful, no longer as arrogant as before. "Swift Thunder City Bienja," the short young man said casually. He stared at the bronze pillar, and his expression turned solemn. Although he had obtained the right to enter the island, he was not overjoyed. Instead, he was extremely cautious. He could only light up 71 eyes, but Changsun Liang could light up 99. How great was the difference between them? "Let me try again," Bienja said as he began to accumulate power. A bestial roar came from his body. It sounded a little like a dragon's roar, but also a little like a tiger's roar. After the roar, a large number of people in the vicinity directly collapsed to the ground. What astonishing strength! He hadn't even made a move, but with just a roar, he had already subdued the enemy without a fight. Wave after wave of powerful aura surged out from his body like a tsunami, pushing the people in the surroundings into a continuous retreat. What peak stage Saint Kings? They were completely insufficient to resist him. In this way, the true elites immediately stood out. For example, Ling Han, the Empress, and a dozen or so others all stood proudly where they were, not taking a single step back. But similarly, there were still different levels of elites. Some people were only barely holding on, while people like Ling Han and the Empress were completely unconcerned. When they released their aura, that was what was truly frightening. Bienja's release of his aura was not to show off, nor was it meant to wound the enemy. Instead, he was accumulating power for a powerful move, and that was why the aura in his body had gone out of control. No prodigy would admit defeat. This bronze pillar was the medium for him to exchange blows with Changsun Liang. The latter could light up 99 eyes, and if he couldn't even light up 90 eyes, then no matter how rich his battle experience was, under the suppression of absolute power, he would only be left with a grievance. He finally moved, still delivering a punch, but this time, his fist was wrapped in a ball of lightning, and one could clearly see multiple patterns of great Tao pulsating, turning into multiple lightning dragons. Pung, the punch landed, and lightning spread out, shaking the heavens and the earth. When the lightning disappeared, it could be seen that there were also rows of holes on the bronze pillar that had lit up. There were still 8 rows. The first 7 rows had all lit up, and the 8th row had 9. What? Such a terrifying attack, and it had actually only increased from 71 eyes to 79 eyes, and hadn't even broken through 80 eyes. 99 eyes. This was practically a record that could make one despair. Hiss! Just how strong was this holy son of Changsun Liang? Bienja couldn't help but be convinced. He stared blankly at the bronze pillar, his expression filled with desolation. At first, he had thought that he stood at the highest peak of the Saint King tier, and only he had the right to look down on others. But only now did he know that there was always a higher mountain. This gap was too wide, so wide that even he could not muster the confidence to surpass it. As it turned out, even if they were at the same cultivation level, the gap could still be so wide. However, Bienja himself was also someone that others had to look up to. 79 eyes. The current best result. and the only person that had obtained the right to enter into Celestial Clouds Island. If any Tom, Dick, or Harry could become a guest of Celestial Clouds Island, then the true prodigies would definitely not spare them a glance, and would be ashamed to be associated with them. But even an elite like Bienja had only managed to unleash 79 eyes, and this caused the ambition of the top prodigies to rise. How many eyes can I unleash? Ho, I'll give it a try as well. A white-clothed youth walked out, his bearing graceful. His outward appearance was much better than Bienja's. However, his abilities were inferior to Bienja's, and even when he used a powerful technique, he had only managed to unleash 74 eyes. Although there was only a difference of 5 eyes, the gap was still very, very big. But he was still taken seriously by everyone, and they were certain that he would definitely shine brilliantly in the competition 10 days later. Every time this kind of competition was held, it would be the moment when prodigies like this would shine brilliantly like fireworks. Prodigies continued to emerge, and though there were a few who managed to unleash the result of over 70 eyes, there was still no one who managed to break through the great barrier of 80 eyes. Mao Shuyu, Wei Bo, and the others also went up to give it a try, but even after they unleashed their treasured tools and gave it their all, Mao Shuyu, who was the strongest among them, only managed to unleash 62 eyes. She seemed to be only 8 eyes away, but it was unknown how much more she would have to increase her abilities in order to catch up. Perhaps only after several million years of accumulation, and raising the number of stars to the level of 20 billion, or even 30 billion, would she be able to unleash a result of over 70 eyes. They were just about to encourage Ling Han to go up and give it a try, but a commotion suddenly broke out in the crowd. Quick, Yuan Xingping is here. Amidst such exclamations, the crowd parted like tidewater, allowing a person to walk over. Yuan Xingping, the publicly acknowledged #1 expert in this competition. Chapter 1702. Yuan Xingping was dressed entirely in black, and there were streaks of golden threads on the cloth. If one looked closely, there would be talisman patterns flashing occasionally. This was a treasured armor, but whether it increased attack or defense, that was unknown. He was incredibly handsome, his hair black and shiny, and his face glowing like white jade. He was the kind of super handsome man that would make even other men's hearts race and turn them gay. But that was Yuan Xingping, and even those who were attracted to him would not dare to show it. Yuan Xingping walked over slowly, as if he were taking a stroll. Even if there were thousands of pairs of eyes staring at him, he was still calm and unruffled, his mental state excellent. The crowd did not feel the slightest bit of urgency. This young man's aura was too astonishing, like an emperor on a journey. Who dared to rush him? He finally arrived in front of the copper pillar, and stopped in his tracks. Facing this young King Tyr who had risen so powerfully, even the red-haired young man appeared to be very respectful, and took the initiative to greet him, saying, "Greetings, Brother Yuan." Yuan Xingping only nodded slightly. He did not need to take the other seriously, but now that the red-haired young man represented Chang Sun Liang, he still had to give him some face. He looked at that copper pillar, and then casually threw a punch at it. Wang! The copper pillar shook violently, and then a whole 9 rows of holes lit up. 82. As expected of Yuan Xingping, too strong. Finally, someone who can reach 80 holes. No wonder Yuan Xingping led Double Extreme City to become the champion with his own strength. This is really boundlessly strong. Everyone gasped in admiration. Although they were all competitors, martial artists always respected the strong. Yuan Xingping was indeed worthy of their respect. Yuan Xingping frowned slightly. He hesitated and did not try again. This made the crowd feel strange. Some guessed that he was intentionally holding back, but others said that even if he went all out, he might not be able to reach 90 holes. So he might as well stop while he was ahead, and leave a bit of mystery. After Yuan Xingping, a few more geniuses appeared, but they all achieved more than 70 holes, and there was still only one person who reached 80 stars. Ling Han, go! Mao Shuyu and the others began to encourage Ling Han again. But coincidentally, the crowd was stirred again at this moment. Dan Yujing had arrived. In the recent 100 years, She had suddenly emerged, like a shooting star streaking across the sky, leaving behind dazzling battle records. Who knew how many outstanding Saint Kings she had defeated? She was also known as the only person in this tournament who could fight Yuan Xingping to his heart's content. Her white dress fluttered in the wind, and her black hair cascaded down like a waterfall. She was so beautiful that many people who had never seen her before fell in love with her at first sight. Fairy Dan. The red-haired young man once again took the initiative to greet them. Among the elites of this round, only these two were worthy of his attention, because Changsun Liang had said, "These two are a little interesting." Since the Lord had said so, he naturally did not dare to be rude to her. Dan Yujing gave him face, and she nodded slightly. Then, she suddenly pressed her palm against the copper pillar. Her delicate hand was snow-white like jade, and it was extremely pleasing to the eye. However, so long as the symbols of the Grand Tao condensed at the center of her palm, there would absolutely not be a single person who dared to arouse any unbearable thoughts towards her. Pung, the palm landed, and the copper pillar instantly emitted a brilliant light that could practically blind a person's eyes. Then the rows of holes lit up. 84. Her result was better than Yuan Xingping's, but she had clearly stored up her strength. Though this was still not her strongest performance, it would definitely be unfair to conclude that she was stronger than Yuan Xingping just like that. Ling Han, hurry up and go. Mao Shiyu and the others encouraged Ling Han for the third time, hoping that no one would cut in line this time. Indeed, there were no outsiders cutting in line, but the Empress stepped out first. Today, she was wearing a red silk dress. Previously, she had been held in Ling Han's arms, and now that she had stepped out, her tall and slender figure immediately attracted everyone's attention. The Empress strode forwards, exuding a dignified air unique to a king tier, making others want to kneel at her feet and offer up their lowly souls. That red-haired young man also stood up involuntarily. He did not know why he had done so either. When he suddenly came back to his senses, he was already standing solemnly with his hands by his sides, as if he was facing the holy sun, Changsun Liang. The Empress naturally would not take it to heart. Whether others respected her or not was meaningless. She stretched out a slender hand and lightly pressed down on the pillar. It was flawless like white jade, so beautiful that it made one drool. This strike of hers was incredibly calm. There was no terrifying aura circulating, and no symbols of great Tao pulsating. It was as if she was greeting someone. A palm pressed down on the pillar. It was a light touch, but the pillar trembled lightly, and the rows of holes lit up. 10 rows. The first 9 rows were all lit up, and 2 holes lit up in the 10th row. 92 holes. At this moment, everyone was dumbfounded, all of them staring with wide eyes. They felt their scalps go numb, and even breathing was difficult. A light touch, and 92 holes lit up. That was definitely a light touch. If she had used her full power, there would definitely be regulations of great Tao appearing. She could create 92 holes like this, so how fierce would her full power be? 99 holes, 100 holes. Heavens, this was an absolute king tier that was not inferior to Changsun Liang. The Empress did not make another move. She only needed to know her approximate strength level. Ling Han showed a slight smile. After the Empress had broken through to Saint King tier, her battle prowess had indeed improved further. Otherwise, even if she went all out, she would probably only be able to create 90 holes. But now, 99 shouldn't be her limit. May I ask for Fairy's esteemed name? The red-haired young man appeared even more respectful. Luan Xing. The Empress replied calmly, and walked towards Ling Han. The red-haired young man clearly wanted to know more about the situation. He took a step forward, and was just about to speak when the Empress glared at him, and he immediately shrank back. Meanwhile, Ling Han smiled and asked, "I have a question. Can I bring my family to Celestial Clouds Island?" Chapter 1704. Your family's steed intended to commit a violent crime and crashed into us. Yet you did not question the cause and effect, and berated us. Was there anyone who was so tyrannical and unreasonable? The Empress's expression immediately darkened. She merely stared coldly at this young man, her imperial might spreading out. In this instant, it was as if the heaven and earth had collapsed, making one feel so heavy that it was hard to breathe. The young man was also overwhelmed by this aura, but he was obviously someone who was used to being arrogant. Once he came back to his senses, he became even more furious. His black hair danced as if he was about to swallow someone whole. What a joke! He was the most beloved descendant of the Tang clan's grand ancestor. So when had he ever been so scorned by anyone before? Big brother Lin, what's the matter? A woman's voice was heard from within the carriage. Very quickly, a woman with a graceful figure also walked out. Her features were beautiful and extremely alluring, yet it gave Ling Han a slight feeling that this world was really small. This woman was Lu Muyu. It's you too. Lu Muyu's thoughts were originally all on that young man, Tong Lin, but when she occasionally glanced at Ling Han and the Empress, she jumped up in fury. The last few days had been practically a nightmare. Her cultivation level had been sealed, and she had been thrown to an old bachelor. Thankfully, she had continuously threatened him, and did not allow him to use force. When she had broken through the seal on Ling Han's cultivation level, she immediately ran over to rescue her younger brother. However, that younger brother of hers was an idiot. He had been scared silly the moment he entered that place, and only knew how to shout don't and don't. What use was that? His ass had been ruined. Seeing that even her younger brother had a psychological shadow, and would scream whenever he saw a man, Lu Muyu's hatred for Ling Han had reached an unprecedented level. Why was this younger brother so important to her? Because this was not her younger brother at all, but rather her son. He had only given birth out of wedlock, and this was a scandal for the Lu clan, especially since Lu Muyu was a genius in martial art. She could form a marriage alliance for the clan, and obtain the support of a great force. If the scandal of having given birth out of wedlock was exposed, which great clan would want her? Thus the son became the younger brother. Lu Muyu indeed had her ways. She came from the one-star city of White Expanse, but in just a few short days after entering Black Moon City, she had already made contact with the Tang clan. The Tang clan was a severing mundane clan, and their grand elder was a fourth severance. Though they could not be considered a top-tier force in Black Moon City, Lu Muyu's ultimate goal was not the Tang clan either. Instead, she wanted to use Tong Lin to enter into the upper circles of Black Moon City. As a matter of fact, she managed to get a slot to enter Celestial Clouds Island. You know them? Tong Lin asked Lu Muyu with a dark expression. Lu Muyu's expression was similarly livid. She wished that she could eat Ling Han's flesh and drink Ling Han's blood. She said hatefully, "They are the ones who injured Bauer." "What's his background?" Tong Lin asked first. As a profligate son of Black Moon City, he knew that there were some people he could not afford to offend. "I met them in the secondary city." Lu Muyu did not belittle the statuses of Ling Han and his companion. She only spoke the truth, but she believed that this was already enough. True enough, an expression of arrogance immediately appeared on Tong Lin's face. At the same time, his fury increased even more. Those who stayed in the secondary city had to be waiting for their application to enter the main city to be approved, but if they had a powerful background, actually, Black Moon City still had an express route that was specially provided for powerful figures to use. For example, if someone from another 2-star city came, or if a 3-star city sent an envoy to pass down an order, could it be that they would also have to wait for over a dozen days? From this, it could be seen that the statuses of these two people were very ordinary, and they definitely came from a 1-star city. Wasn't there going to be a martial arts tournament recently? This was a fitting description. These two people were the representatives of a certain small city. Though the Tang clan was only a severing mundane tier force, they were under the feet of the emperor, so they were naturally superior. How could Tong Lin not be furious? A country bumpkin from a small city actually dared to block his carriage. If news of this spread out, where would his face be? "Kneel," he said coldly. "Slap yourself. You are not allowed to stop before I say so. Let's go, wife. This guy is an idiot." Ling Han held the Empress in his arms. He could not be bothered to pay attention to this guy that had no intelligence at all. Tong Lin shot out with a xiao, blocking the path of Ling Han and the Empress, and asked angrily, "Do you two know my identity?" "I do." Ling Han smiled and nodded. "Didn't I say it just now? You are an idiot." "Fuck." Tong Lin suppressed his anger, and then said, "I am Tong Lin. My clan's ancestor is a 4th Severance elite, and is also a 4-star elder of the Black Moon sect." The elders of the Black Moon sect were divided into many levels, and were divided according to cultivation level. For example, a 1st Severance was 1 star, and a 2nd Severance was 2 stars. After advancing into the dividing soul tier, Yang Soul was a 5-star elder, Yin Soul was a 6-star elder, Earth Soul was a 7-star elder, and Yang Soul was an 8-star elder. An 8-star elder was actually on par with the sect master, but even the Black Moon sect only had a mere 3 8-star elders. Perhaps there were old antiques that had secluded themselves for innumerable years and had not come out to meet others, but this number should not exceed the number of fingers on one hand. Tong Lin's expression was filled with pride, though the Tong clan's ancestor was only a 4th Severance, equal to the strongest in a 1-star small city. He did not have the title of a 4-star elder of the Black Moon sect. This meant that the Tong clan's ancestor would be a head above other 4th Severance elites. Ling Han smiled faintly and asked, "And then?" "What and then?" Tong Lin was slightly dumbfounded. After reporting such a terrifying background, shouldn't the other be scared witless, and he could do whatever he wanted? Why was the result completely different from what he had imagined? "Hiss, you guys were not acting according to common sense." "Brother Lin." Lu Muyu also walked over. Her eyes were filled with malice, but her expression was filled with concern, and she said, "Forget it, don't fight with them. They are very strong, and I'm afraid." "Afraid of what?" This kind of persuasion not only did not appease Tong Lin's anger, but instead made him even angrier. The great Tong Lin can't take care of these 2 people? This was exactly the kind of attitude she wanted. Lu Muyu pretended to be aggrieved, and lowered her head. If she did not fan the flames, and let Tong Lin fight to the death, how could she use someone else to do her dirty work? She knew that Tong Lin definitely could not defeat Ling Han, but that was fine. Tong Lin was the Tong clan's ancestor's favorite descendant. If he knew that he had been beaten, how could he tolerate this? Ling Han swept an eye over Lu Muyu. This woman really had the heart of a snake and a scorpion. The punishment previously had been too light, and she had not learned her lesson at all. He smiled calmly and asked, "Chicken boy, how do you want to deal with us?" "Chicken boy?" Tong Lin almost jumped up. He had already stopped being a chicken boy several tens of thousands of years ago. "All right? You can't you call me chicken boy just because my surname is Tong." To him, the 3 words chicken boy were practically the greatest humiliation. He had not eaten meat for several tens of thousands of years, so there had to be a problem in that area. "Under the might of my Tong clan, you are destined to suffer the consequences of your own actions." Tong Lin said coldly, "I'll give you one last chance. Immediately kowtow to me and admit your mistake. Otherwise humph." "There are so many fools." Ling Han moved, and with 2 paw sounds, both Tong Lin and Lu Muyu were knocked unconscious. He tossed them into the bushes in the distance, and after thinking for a moment, he stripped off their clothes. These 2 naked pigs were piled on top of each other, and it was as if they were doing that. "Wife, let's take a carriage over." Ling Han stretched out his hand towards the Empress. The Empress agreed gladly, and boarded the chariot. Meanwhile, Ling Han steered the 3-headed dragon, and drove towards the castle ahead. Chapter 1705. The 3-headed dragon was naturally unwilling, and still wanted to resist Ling Han. But Ling Han only released a slight aura, and this divine beast was so frightened that it almost spat out its guts, and it obediently became his mount. There was not just 1 road that led to the castle, but rather 5. When Ling Han's carriage arrived, he saw that there were already a great many carriages parked here, of all kinds, and in great numbers. Many people did not enter into the castle, but rather stood here as if they were waiting for someone. "Brother Tong Lin is here." When the chariot drove over, there were immediately 3 men coming up to greet him. They were Tong Lin's best friends, and could also be said to be a gang of scoundrels. Because their clan was not as powerful as the Tong clan, Tong Lin was also their leader. When the three of them saw that Ling Han was driving the carriage, they couldn't help but feel strange. Since when did the dragon chariot need a driver? That three-headed dragon had long since gained intelligence, so did it need someone to drive it? Furthermore, this driver was actually only a great saint. His cultivation level was a little low, wasn't it? No matter what, he had to be a saint king at least. Under their gazes, Ling Han opened the door of the carriage and invited his wife out. Since the empress was already in the limelight, he might as well play the supporting role again. Today, he had come to set off his wife. The empress walked out. Her figure was slender, and her head was almost touching the top of the carriage door. She wore a golden dress that was woven from the best saintly material. The material came from the mountain bandit's den, and it had naturally been rushed out by Ling Han in the past few days. Her bearing was originally unparalleled, and added with the contrast of this saint-level precious dress, she suddenly became the center of attention, and the veil on her face also added a sense of mystery to her, causing people to have endless thoughts, wanting to see her true appearance. Gasp! Brother Tong Lin is really lucky, actually getting such an exquisite beauty. You haven't seen her face, so how do you know she's exquisite? Fuck, with such bearing and figure. If she's not an exquisite beauty, I'll cut off my head and let you kick it like a ball. The three men looked stunned and couldn't help but whisper to each other. The others in the surroundings were also like this. The empress's bearing was really too strong and could become the center of attention at any moment. With her here, the other women were purely supporting characters. She is Luan Xing. What? The super genius who blasted out 92 eyes yesterday. Hiss, I've heard of her name, but I never imagined that her demeanor would be so intoxicating. She must be the holy maiden of a great power. Otherwise, how could she have such shocking talent, strength, and aura? Strange, this is clearly the Tong family's war chariot. With the Tong family's strength, how did they manage to get on this line? Everyone could not understand. Only a dozen or so people had passed the test of strength on the copper pillar yesterday. But Changsun Liang had also widely invited the younger generation of the various forces of Black Moon City. Thus, the number of people had increased. Everyone knew that though Tong Lin's talent in martial art could not be considered bad, compared to the Empress, he was not even qualified to carry her shoes, and the Tong clan was far from being able to associate with a large sect. This matter was strange. Ling Han cracked a smile, and his mischievous heart was already burning. Who asked him to be friends with the large black dog? He coughed and said, "Let me explain to everyone. We encountered Tong Lin on the way." But Tong Lin suddenly became excited and entered the meadow with his female companion in his arms. He gave up the war chariot to us, saying that there was no need to rush, and that he would be here in a while. Excited, and entered the meadow with his female companion in his arms? Everyone's expressions were strange. Could it be that Tong Lin had suddenly become lustful, and could not help but want to mount the chariot? That's not right. Even if he wanted to do that, wouldn't it be better to do it in the carriage? Someone asked curiously. None of their chariots were ordinary. They were protected by formations that could block even powerful attacks, and shockproof and soundproofing were not a problem. Who knows, Tong Lin likes to do it in the wild. We can be discovered at any time, and there's a feeling of clandestine love. That's not bad. I too want to try it in the future. Shimenda, you stare at other people's wives all day long. Aren't you afraid of retribution? This news was more explosive, and everyone could not help but become gossipy, and became gossipy women. Just at this moment, another carriage drove over, and a young man alighted. He had a beautiful female companion with him, but his expression was very strange. The moment he alighted, he said anxiously, "You guys definitely won't be able to guess what I encountered on the way here." He paused, and as if he was whetting everyone's curiosity, he continued, "There was a pair of adulterous couple actually having sex in the wild. Guess who is that man?" "Fuck, it really is Tong Lin," everyone practically said at the same time. The young man from before was stunned. "Fuck, you guys have already arrived?" At first, everyone was still skeptical, but now that they heard this young man say it, It was equivalent to having solid proof, so they had to believe it even if they did not want to. TSK. This Tong Lin was really so hungry that he could not be choosy. They were about to reach the castle, and he still wanted to have sex. If Changsun Liang knew of this young King Tyr would definitely be furious. You actually came to my territory to have sex in the wild. What kind of humiliation is this to me? Everyone immediately decided in their hearts that they would draw a line between themselves and Tong Lin. Otherwise, if they were implicated, that would be terrible. This was Changsun Liang, a reclusive King Tyr, and his future was destined to be boundless. How could they offend him? Let's go, it's time to go in. Everyone no longer had the mood to call out to their friends here. Tong Lin's 3 adulterous friends also turned around and left, wanting nothing more than to pretend that they had never known Tong Lin before. The castle was very large. Thus, even though they were clearly at the main entrance, it still took them some time to walk into the main hall. There were already rows of tables set up here. The tables were not large, and could only accommodate 2 people sitting side by side. This was also the reason why the red-haired young man had said that he could only bring 1 female companion. There was a plaque on each table, and written on it was a person's name. The meaning was naturally very clear. Take your seat according to your number. This was good as well, lest everyone fought over it. Ling Han and the Empress found their seats, but there was only the Empress's name on it. As for Ling Han, he was purely here to eat and drink for free today. He did not mind at all, and sat down in a cross-legged position, and began to whisper to the Empress. The table was very low, so there was no need for chairs. There was a cushion on the ground, and one could sit on it. And, after Ling Han sat down, he couldn't help but be slightly surprised, because there was a warm flow from the cushion that entered his body, and it actually had the effect of increasing his origin power. However, he had now reached the peak stage of the Great Saint Tyr, and this kind of benefit was ineffective on him. As expected of the holy son of a sect, even the things that he used to entertain others were of such high quality. Ling Han suddenly felt the urge to pack them up. He could give them to Feng Piyun and the others, though the effect would not be especially great. No matter how small an ant's leg was, it was still meat. If it could be a little faster, why not? Hey, guess what I found when I came here just now? Someone called out very excitedly the moment he entered the main hall. Tong Lin is having sex in the open. A few people immediately said disapprovingly. The person who had just entered was immediately dumbfounded. He had thought that he had discovered a big piece of news. Reading on a phone was even more refreshing. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.